Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. We are in the Committee of the Whole meeting of February 20th. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. There's an agenda in front of the committee. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Elliott, second by Councillor Kent. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. First up, we have our Brennan Park Recreation Centre community engagement. Pastor Bruce Dawson. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Tim Hoskin, Director of Recreation Services. I'm here today with a project team with Christina Moore, Robin Arthurs, and Neil Plum, and Camille Say, and Sean Byrne, who's with us from Cassian Architecture. I'd like to hand it over just to start to Ms. Arthurs to frame the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee, Mayor Heinzman. We're here today to introduce the engagement portion of the Brennan Park plan. And the Brennan Park plan was one of Council's identified strategic priorities that has also been dovetailed into the long-term real estate and facilities strategy. So where we're at right now with the Brennan Park Recreation Center plan, this engagement is going to springboard off of the 2012 to April 2013 engagement that went into preparing the Parks and Rec Master Plan. So we've taken that plan and through this last 5 years developed a recreation center that was designed on the feedback that we heard at that time. And there's a couple of iterations of design that have gone into this plan. And where we're at now is the community's changed in the last 5 years. And we need to do a fulsome re-engagement to make sure that what we came up with as a result of the Parks and Rec Master Plan in April 2013 is still on track. And that's where we're going now. We're launching into that. And then at the end of the engagement, it will dovetail back in to the long-term real estate facility strategy as far as the capital planning, the financing, and how we're going to implement all of our facilities and real estate needs, Brennan Park included.
Thank you. And just to build on that, it is a two-pronged approach in full recognition that we are in need of other recreation facilities beyond the recreation center. So the other prong of the community engagement will be with Brennan Park stakeholders and to understand their needs to set vision and goals for the surrounding parkland around the recreation center so that we can move forward with confidence that what we've developed is in line with community wants, needs, expectations. So let's get started. So today, the objectives out of today's meeting, we would like to have a little background on Brennan Park, its history, explain a little bit of Brennan Park statistics, and also the human connection of the recreation story. Just how recreation is the center of our community, literally and figuratively, and to hear a few voices around that, and to bring a little bit of, not a little bit, a whole bunch of cute factor. There's also Brackendale Elementary will be presenting their class project. So the kindergarten class has been developing a project on Brennan Park, and they would like to present to council today. So that should be happening very, very shortly. And with your blessing, Mayor, we would like to not hold up the kids when they come out and to go on ready.
Also never to hold up the kids.
And then we're really getting into the rubber hits the road and getting into the Brennan Park Recreation Center renovations and expansion feasibility study. And Sean Byrne is with us from Cassian Architecture who has brought some very fresh eyes and good ideas, and will walk us through that today. And finally, the community engagement plan. We would like council to endorse 2 recommendations today on the scope and decision making, or the decision statement around the recreation center and the engagement around the parkland. So Brennan Park, a small bit of history, very condensed. The Centennial Fields, 1967, to just very recently, the turf fields and Skills Park and lights at Hendrickson Field. But what I want to strongly reiterate is that Squamish has an amazing history of volunteerism and fundraising. And our facilities wouldn't have been made possible without that. And I think that's a thing we need to look at going forward as well. So the recreation center, just a bit of wow factor. A recreation center sees nearly 500,000 visitors a year, and nearly means we're just a few thousand folks off. So how does that compare? City of Victoria, their pull rink about 254,000. Major metropolitan community center of 330,000. The Richmond Oval, perhaps the biggest recreation center in the world, is now hitting 900,000, and that's a big milestone for them. An average recreation center or community center is probably somewhere around 100,000 visitors. So we're a well-used, well-run center. And a few stats. These are directly out of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So there are some minor updates that haven't been incorporated here, but it does give us a sense. If you just look at the average at the bottom, green means, well, we're within the average. The red ones, the highlighted, are showing, well, we're below, and probably something that we should be looking at as we engage the community. So some notables are ball diamonds, and the major issue around ball diamonds is the overlap that they are shared with soccer fields, so it's one or the other. Basketball courts, running tracks, and one that we've heard quite a bit recently is around spray parks. That the community, members in our community are advocating for water park, spray park, and of course, CrossFit. So I'd like to share a video with you today, and the Recreation Center staff, or a couple of members of our staff, spent an hour and went around and talked to some of our patrons, and just to highlight.
Oh, it's an unbelievable place to come. I've got grandchildren that I bring here for, she's 13, and the other ones used to come and go swimming all the time. And we're here every week for the spin class. It's for the whole family, and it's a great place to come.
I like Brennan Park because it makes me happy.
Life itself.
If I didn't have it right now, I don't think I could cope with anything.
Brennan Park is a place where me and my friends can hang out and have a good time.
Brennan Park is a family to me and good health. It keeps me active.
We love Brennan Park because it provides family activities and memories together.
Good to see some SLRD residents.
So I don't think our class is quite here yet, so we'll just carry on, and we'll come back to Brackendale Elementary. I'll introduce Sean's presentation. And just a little bit of background. The original plan developed by CJP Architects, which is now Cassian, was developed back in 2003. And that good work was built upon and incorporated the Parks and Rec master plan, 1 year of engagement information that we got, as well as staff input and some noted improvements. So the plan was updated in 2016 and some recent updates by Sean with some fresh eyes just in the last few weeks, and addresses the site layout. It addresses accessibility, incorporates, as I mentioned, the Parks and Rec master plan recommendation, and an updated new order of magnitude. So I'd like to introduce Sean.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. So as Tim mentioned, we've been working off and on this center for about the last 15 years. So myself more recently. Maybe let's start at the top here. Thank you. So I think everyone recognizes the aerial here. So I'll where's the next arrow? So just an overview. I'm sure that everyone knows the center here quite well, but there are basically three sort of significant components to the center. Obviously the arena or the rink with the associated change rooms and washrooms and mezzanine, the gym and Tantalus room. Is that correct?
Seniors Lounge, formerly
Seniors Lounge. There's a small commercial kitchen in this area, and then of course the pool and change rooms and pool equipment room, and then kind of all connected through this the main foyer space. So the current facility is around 6,000 square meters, or around 65,000 square feet. There's around 500 parking spaces. And so just some exterior shots here. I mean, one thing that I guess I noticed immediately is that there's maybe a need for weather protection at the main entrance. Just as as I walked around the building with Tim to kind of get a better sense of it. So it was built. I guess the first phase was built in 1978, which was the arena, and then the second phase, the pool, in 1992. So 40 years old, the first phase, and. Sorry,
Sorry, keep going. Sorry, yeah, keep going and Tim will let us know when
Okay.
you're being overtaken by cute people.
Yeah, I can't compete.
Yeah, you can.
At all. So 1992, so there hasn't been significant expansion, for the last 26 years or so. So, and in that period, obviously the population has increased and people's needs have changed. So, good time to take a look at it. Internally, so fairly low ceilings in the foyer entry area. Original sort of washroom facilities and change rooms. No access to the mezzanine, for example. There's no handicapped access or disabled access to the mezzanine floor. The existing gym, so the flooring in that gym is really not conducive to sports. We certainly want to look at upgrading that space. And then the administrative areas are sort of distributed in a couple of areas around the center. So, one of the outcomes of the discussions earlier were that, if we could consolidate the administration area into sort of one cohesive space, that would be preferable. So just to kind of summarize, so first I'll just go through the areas that we're looking at upgrading, and then there's the expansion areas. So in the gym and former seniors lounge, so open up that space, remove that fixed stage, add a movable partition wall, which would run along here. Remove the ceilings kind of new flooring, new lighting, clean up the ceilings, new paint to the walls, and then a portable stage similar to the image here in the bottom left-hand corner. Then in the entry concourse, so again, remove this suspended grid ceiling. There's quite a lot of, there's double height in there. You can have a really amazing high volume in there, which we certainly want to take advantage of. So remove that grid ceiling and the lights, new lights, spray out. It's sort of an exposed ceiling, so kind of tidy that up, but it's going to be a really nice high volume space. And then also kind of refurbish these washrooms in here, and new flooring and lighting and wall paint in these side areas. In the rink change rooms, so new partitions and fixtures, new lighting, kind of a refresh, additional storage if we can possibly make that happen. The washrooms, which are off the side of the lobby, so also new partitions and fixtures, lighting, general improvement. In mezzanine, we'll add an elevator to access, so for full accessibility to that level, and also remove some of the partitions in there and create a movable folding wall partition. New ceiling and light fixtures generally, sort of in most of these areas that we're going to be renovating. And then we get to the what new spaces might we look at expanding to the center. So new centralized administration area. So these are kind of the requirements for that space. A second ice arena, so new ice sheet, new change rooms, washrooms, storage areas, viewing stands. And then a wellness center. Now this has a number of different components to it. It's got a proposed fitness center, probably its own change rooms, washrooms, some multi-purpose spaces, and such as classrooms, yoga room, general use spaces. Can we pause it?
Let's pause it. We'll take 5 minutes
Okay.
a few minutes to let everybody come in, and glad they brought the ukulele, good job. And we'll find a place to put their beautiful model. So we're gonna pause for a few minutes. Come on in. So we are back at our committee of the whole meeting, and we're welcoming the kindergarten class from Brackendale Elementary School. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming. I hear you guys have some awesome ideas, and we're really interested in hearing from them. So maybe I'll pass it over to your teacher.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. And Ms. Heinzman in particular, and Mr. Hoskins, and all of the members of council. We really appreciate this time to present our ideas. My name is Ms. Wong. I am the teacher librarian at Brackendale Elementary School. This is Mrs. Caraboli. She is the kindergarten teacher. This is her class. And we have some lovely parents here with us as well. And our principal, Mrs. Sanger, is right there. There she is. Our lovely principal has come to support us, so thank you for that as well. We're going to have Sessa come up first, and she's going to talk about our project. So maybe, can I get her on
Yeah,
here?
she can stand on there if she doesn't fall.
I will support her here. Yes. We're going to be referring to the posters that are here. Is this microphone?
Yeah, that one's, can you actually stand up? Awesome, hold on tight.
We found out all the different things that the children like to do most at Brennan Park.
And Haley's going to she's going to present something. And Haley, Ms. Heinzman is at the end of the table there.
I can come up.
And Lewis is coming as well. Hi, Haley.
Hi.
Do you see Ms.
Yes,
Heinzman?
This is
Thank you. Is that for me?
Yeah.
For council to look at?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Looks beautiful. Like your dress too.
Thank you.
And Lewis wants to present, did you present to Mr. Hoskins as well?
I received our wishes for Brennan Park. Thank you, Lewis.
So those are two of our class books. And what else did we find out on our chart over here? What did we find out, Cessa?
We found out that most people like to swim and do gymnastics and play hockey.
So every single child at Brackendale Elementary School took our survey, and we've got some good data that might be useful. Tia is up next.
We found out what the children at Brackendale need to make Brennan Park a better place. I'll take a look at our poster.
Skateboarding, more general information, the pool, and the gym. Thank you, Tia. And Carter, come on next. There it is. Carter's going to talk a little bit about our model. Do you want to come up over here?
We made a model of this body about Brennan Park. Look at all the things that we added. Thank you.
Good job.
And we have a song to share with you, and we hope that you might join us. Hannah, can you pass out the instruments to those some adults who might want to play? Oh, they're in that room somewhere. And we play this broken string. Where are they? Oh, they're right here. Okay.
All right, Jason,
And
come on.
Yuli's going to point to the words of our song, which are right here, and we hope that you might sing along with us.
You gonna cry?
Tammy, you're going to come and show you the dancing show.
All right.
Show the dance moves.
Somebody takes
And
it.
the rest of us have Tammy over here. She's going to lead us in all the actions. Kind of just in your hand. Stand up so everyone can see you. Hey,
Who else wants an instrument?
who would like an instrument? Don't be shy. Because we've had enough time to play with
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Yes.
Hannah, look this way. Do you see some grown-ups that need an instrument?
Oh, yes. All right. So
Make good
Mrs. Foley and I wrote the song for all of us. All of us who live in Squamish and who use Brennan Park. Ready, Mrs. Foley? Yes. Okay, I'll stand over here.
I go to Brennan Park to ride my bike, ride my bike, ride my bike. I go to Brennan Park to ride my bike on the Sorja Trail. I go to Brennan Park to swim in the pool, swim in the pool, swim in the pool. I go to Brennan Park to swim in the pool. Contact lessons every week. Brennan Park Community Center is where we go to play. That's where we go to swim and bike and skate and play all day. Go to Brennan Park to skate on the rink, skate on the rink, skate on the rink. I go to Brennan Park to skate on the rink with my helmet and my skates. Brennan Park Community Center is where we go to
words for us. Where's Stephanie? There she is.
Thank you for inviting us to the meeting. Thank you for listening to our ideas about Brennan Park.
Thank you.
Well, as I said, I think you guys just brought a whole lot of sunshine into our day and into this room. And it's really important that you guys are thinking about what you want to see at Brennan Park and helping us to look at what we might want to do there, because this is the place that you guys are going to grow up with, playing and learning and exercising and making friends and making memories. So it's really important. And we thank you so much for the work that you did. And we invite you back to our chambers anytime you want to get out of school. Thank you very much. Anyone else want to add any comments? Tim, do you want to say?
Oh, wow, I got the warm fuzzies. That was
You got the
great.
tissues out, Tim.
Can we keep the model for a little bit?
Sure.
Or, yeah, I'd love to share that with the team. So, yeah, and thank you so much. It's very heartfelt.
Thank you as well for the opportunity, Mr. Hoskins. We couldn't
Thank you.
Tim, did you want to bring that model to Brennan Park then? Or?
Either here in the lobby or at Brennan Park, but
I think Brennan Park gets more people.
yeah.
And we'll get more visibility. But
Yeah.
did you guys have fun doing this?
Yeah, very much.
Thank you.
Did a great job.
You guys are heading back to your school, is that right?
We're just going to head to the library for this visit.
Okay, great. Well, why don't we take a few minute recess, and I'm sure council members want to say thanks personally, but on my behalf, on behalf of council, thank you very much. We'll see you around town. Thank you. We are back in our committee of the whole meeting, and that was a tough act to follow, but I'll pass it back over to.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Wow, that was great.
Remind us where we were.
Yeah, so to bring us back to the presentation, my name is Tim Hoskin, Director of Recreation Services. I have Sean Byrne here with Cassian Architects, and we're about a third of the way through a presentation on options for an updated, renovated, expanded Brennan Park Recreation Center. And the slide that we have up, we'll just maybe just restart here. And it's talking about the options on an updated center. So over to Sean.
Fantastic to see who we're doing this for. That's
Exactly.
so inspiring and an impossible act to follow. Maybe I'll sing at the end.
All right.
A little soft.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start actually, or restart again possibly. In the bottom left-hand corner are project goals, just some of the goals that we identified as sort of the drivers for the renovation and expansion of the center. Full accessibility to all areas of the center. Flexibility, just acknowledging that future demands may be just impossible to determine at the moment, so we'll create a series of new spaces that will be flexible to allow for change in the future. Value for money, of course, so I'll get into the construction methodology that we've selected, which we believe is the most economical and will bring the most value to the project. Phased construction, we recognize that the proposed expansion areas are quite significant and they will need to be phased, so we've got a sort of at least the beginning of a solution for that. And then inviting community hub, as we heard from some of the people who were interviewed at the center, people use the center for all kinds of reasons. It's also just a social center for Squamish. So on the upper right hand side of the slide, so there's three new areas that we've identified or have been identified, I suppose, for expansion to the center. So a centralized administration area, as we discussed a little earlier. So the administrative areas are distributed on various levels and in various areas of the center currently. So the idea is to corral those into one contiguous space. A second ice arena, so new ice sheet, new change rooms and washrooms with associated storage areas and viewing stands. And then the wellness center, which will include, amongst other things and with input from everybody, a fitness center with a high ceiling space, additional change rooms, washrooms, multi-purpose spaces for classrooms, a yoga space, general use. I guess that will be sort of determined again over the next consultation process as to what kinds of spaces really are the community is really looking for. And then some office space for the staff who will be working in that center. So the idea is to develop at least and fully fit out part of it for the moment, and then build a large enough building or volume of a building so that in future it can be, upper levels can be fit out and expanded into. Go to the next sheet. So over the last couple of years, we looked at several expansion options. So just starting in the top left-hand corner with option 1. So the blue area, the blue blobs on each plan are the rinks. The yellow are the wellness center, and the red is the administrative area. So in option 1, the gym, or sorry, the arena is positioned currently where the parking lot is, up here, and then the administration area here, and then a wellness center, sort of multi-story wellness center here adjacent to the pool. So we looked at this one and thought, well, you know, we're eating into quite a lot of the parking lot with this option, and we're also obscuring the glazing along the side of the pool here. So this option maybe isn't the preferable option. Option 2 positions the new arena in that current sort of grassy area, sort of at the back of the center. So the pool being here and the existing arena being here. That's less disruptive to the parking area, certainly. The wellness center, again, probably not ideally positioned because it does then block the windows for the pool area. Option 3, we did look at a fabric structure. They're called sprung buildings. There's a couple of different manufacturers. Right now, I guess we're working on similar facilities in various areas, and the cost of these fabric structures is very similar to a pre-engineered structure, and in terms of the operations cost, it's going to be much higher. You do have a lower level of insulation, and longevity and maintenance are going to be increased. So we looked at option 4. Thought, well, what if we corral the wellness center and the arena here in that sort of that field area behind the existing arena, and then in every case here the administration block is kept in the same position. And one of the issues with this one, unfortunately, is that there's a beautiful stand of trees along here. So if we went with that option, there'd probably be a lot of upset people. So we thought, well, that's not a viable solution either. So we took another look at it again over the last few months, and we came up with a 5th option, which maintains that beautiful stand of trees along here, positions the arena sort of in that field area between the pool and the rink in the back, and then positions the wellness center at the front of the building. So it does remove some of the parking, around 25 spaces, so which is about 5% of the total number of parking spaces. So a little bit, but not excessive removal of parking spaces. Administration here is central to the existing arena, to the gym, to the new arena and the existing pool. What this also does is it positions the wellness center at the front, so it faces the community. There's that sort of new residential development along here. A lot of people enter the center through here, if not most people, and it really does give a fresh new look to the center. Glazing right now, it's concrete block wall and metal siding. In the future, it could be opened up with glazing here. So the other some of the other advantages of this option is that we recognize that phasing is going to be necessary. So what it does allow is that this new arena can be built with minimal disruption to the rest of the spaces. Likewise with the wellness center, again, the connection to the existing facility is fairly minimal, so the disruption can also be minimized. And then the administration office, here this would be built before decanting the existing administration offices, also to minimize disruption to staff in the center. And again, we would improve that foyer experience by raising the ceiling so that this central space really is high volume and inviting.
Can you just explain how the existing change rooms for the arena would be expanded?
So these ones in here, this concourse is it would be a new connection from the foyer to the rink. So there's an opportunity to expand. We'll have to look at this structurally, but there may be an opportunity to expand along here. And then this is a section through this building here. So the idea is that the ground level would be fit out in a first phase, and then the upper levels could be developed and fully fitted out at a later date. So we would build the entire enclosure in a first stage and then develop it later. It's going to be more economical to build that space all at once rather than add levels.
Let's just stay on this slide for a bit.
Yep.
And just some questions to this slide. Did you look at the feasibility of adding height to any of these, either the rink that you show here in blue or any of these other new structures? Whether it be residential or whatever it may be.
Probably, we haven't looked at adding residential onto this building. Structurally, we would have to look into adding more levels onto existing buildings. And it's the more you touch older parts of the building, then the more code upgrades and all that kind of thing you will encounter. So the idea is to minimize that kind of engagement with the existing building.
My question was more towards, I understand that you couldn't actually probably put anything on the existing buildings that are there now to raise it up because of the weight and the age of what's underneath its foundation, but
yeah.
my question was more directed towards the new additions that you're discussing there and using that airspace above those for whatever. But if we're going to build something new, we might as well look into that as well. That's my feeling.
Yeah, there's a whole other conversation,
Yeah,
I think,
of course.
that come down the road, just more
Just
specific
throwing it.
questions about this diagram, just
Yeah.
so it's all clear in everyone's mind. Councillor Chappelle?
Yeah, I don't really, my interest is in not building on a space that's actually not sufficient for earthquake. The old infrastructure of this
We're going to
building,
get to that conversation, let's
that's
focus
what I
on
keep
this.
hearing, okay?
On this particular diagram, Councillor Elliott and Councillor
Was there any discussion about a future expansion of the pool? I mean, I like this
Yeah.
layout because it allows for that, but it doesn't seem entertained in any of these diagrams that we might eventually want to do that.
Great question. Where we're at right now is in capacity for the pool is we're getting to a point where we need to look at the allocation. Most pools, for example, in Vancouver and Metro Vancouver, the swim clubs, etc., all train in the morning. And right now we're starting to see, we are seeing capacity in prime time hours, after school hours. That doesn't mean we're at capacity all the time. So the first step before we get to the place of building a pool is to start the reallocation and moving clubs to the morning, and that's a conversation we would like to get in the next year or so. But we don't also want to lose sight that we will need a pool add-on, but we didn't want to we didn't want to bring in another level of complexity at this point. A pool is a very, very expensive touch. And my concern, the project team concern is that if we have this included in the initial phasing, the sticker shock might just set us completely back. Where I think we can get to is we get through this phasing and we look at a phase 4 of adding on to the existing pool. We've done some preliminary looking at it. We believe there's enough space beside the existing pool, and we haven't encumbered that with this option. And we also might want to look at in 10, 15 years that perhaps at that point we want to be off-site. Do we want another pool in another area? So these are things that need to be considered, and they need to be engaged in public on and make sure expectations are there. That we haven't lost sight of the pool, we haven't lost sight of other recreation facilities, but right now in the scope of engagement, it is not included in the order of magnitude cost.
Yeah, and just a reminder, this is just a launching off point for the community
Correct.
engagement. This is not
No
by
decisions
any means, so continue on, and then
Yeah.
I've got Councilor Parish, Bell, Liz, and
And what about consideration for field users in terms of change rooms and that sort of thing? Are they part of this building? Is it an outbuilding? Because I know coming in with cleats on, like it does a number on our
does.
building, and when they use the change rooms that are shared with the pool, it gets pretty gnarly in there on Saturday mornings for the swimmers sometimes. So I'm just wondering how we're accommodating kids who've been out on the soccer fields or the baseball diamonds and needing to change and that sort of thing.
Thank you. So through the community engagement, and that is why we have this two-pronged approach, is we don't want other users to feel left out. That we fully acknowledge that other recreation facilities need upgrading and need to be addressed. We know everyone in this room understands that the outside concession, field concession, washrooms, they're old, they're dated, and probably not meeting the needs of the community from location to capacity. So that will be discussed in the community engagement. It is not incorporated in this design. My gut on it is perhaps it might meet capacity updating, but I'm not convinced that the location would be right if we're centralizing field use, and the most heavy field use is around the turf field area. Maybe that's where the investment should be. So I think we need to ask our community where it should go.
Councilor Parish.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, while we're in the dream stage, I don't see anything wrong with showing an addition onto the pool. It's not a new pool, it's just expanded stuff. The one thing that the new concourse area, in my opinion, should be extended right to the end of the rink. It's not a big, yeah, otherwise, it's a lot of cheap space while you're constructing it. And so you've gone through we had 4 designs up there, and so I guess the committee's gone through that. This is the one that's been picked. Is that what you're bringing forward? Or, I saw some good things in the other ones in the 30 seconds I looked at them. Is this the one now?
Thank you, Councilor Pryor. Good question. Just on the concourse, certainly this is an option idea, and through community engagement, council engagement, this is going to get better. The reason that specifically the concourse is stopped there is that's where our generator is, and we have to move the generator to make that work. But in the scheme of things, pretty small potatoes in the scope of things. Whereas, I'm sorry, there was another part.
Well, I was just saying, like Karen brought up an addition to the pool, and in one rendition, you had the Health and Wellness Center added onto the side of the pool, which is, in my opinion, also a good place to add something, whether it's a wellness center or an addition to the pool. And I don't think Council Elliott was thinking of another pool. She was just thinking of, expanded space in the pool.
So when we looked at the options, and nothing is dismissed at this point. Where we're at is we're at a jumping off spot that we want to dig a little deeper. And the broader that we go, the less deep we can get through our community engagement. So with the options, there is value in each one of those options. However, when we were weighing them, we found the most value in this option here for meeting the values of accessibility, flexibility, and et cetera, et cetera. So we would hope through the community engagement, maybe we've got it wrong. We fully acknowledge that. We don't think we do. But if there's something we have wrong here or a better idea, that should be flushed out through the engagement.
Well, when I look at all four of the drawings there, the one where the rink was in the parking lot, I mean, immediately I thought, well, the parking can be moved to where the rink is. So, I mean, you might take out 40 stalls, but you'll put 40 stalls back in. And the thing that I originally liked when I first looked at that one was if you go to Burnaby where all those big rinks are, you go up onto the second floor, you can go from rink to rink. You can stand and watch a hockey game over there and then walk across the second floor foyer and watch a hockey game there. And I don't play hockey and I don't watch hockey, but I thought that was really nice.
Roller derby.
Whatever.
That's a great idea.
So I just wondered how you came to this one and thought, well, and see, if I look at this one, there's, from what I see right now, there's no connection on the second floor between the two rinks, and perhaps there is, and there's going to be a...
Perhaps there could be, but
Yeah.
There
that's a good
actually
point.
could be.
That's a
Yep.
good idea.
Yep.
I mean, these, I don't want council to get too bogged down in just give some feedback, because the public engagement will really start to tease out these things. I have Councillor Chappelle and Councillor Blackton Wolf and Councillor Race and Councillor Kent.
Thank you. So I have difficulties with these models without economic viability. So without having places where you can actually earn money and you're just looking at spending money, building on a 40-year-old foundation and having no way to actually recoup the money with using airspace. I wonder why and we're taking this to public engagement. So we're taking a model that has no economic viability into public engagement without the option of having a fifth option, which is building a new space in the back. And also on the pool, the problem with the pool is it's not competition size. So our pool can't have inside competitions. We have to actually leave the community to go to competitions because we have not got an Olympic-sized pool. Our pool is too short and it's inadequate. We have 500K kids going into the pool that are training and a community that values training and fitness, but is in a building that's inadequate to do so. And another thing that this building lacks is juvenile space. We're looking at adult space, but we don't have any space for juveniles. We need separate space for neuro. If you want a wellness center, you're gonna have to have a large wellness center that includes things like NeuroFit and senior space, juvenile space. So when I look at just adding on and taking away parking in order to slap building parts on, I really don't see financial modeling or the capability for a community to actually recoup any funds off this with having rentable space, large community space, art space. So adding on to that 40-year-olds, like going to the community with building onto a 40-year-old foundation that's not been stabilized, and we look at earthquake proofing in all our other buildings. If we're gonna do a massive renovation like this and build a second rink, it's not gonna be renovated again. I'd like that fifth option of actually rebuilding a space with air height that has some economic viability, that allows access for high school use and other, just a little bit bigger thinking than just, we need a second rink, so put it here. We need a fitness facility, so put it here. And we really do need a competition-sized pool because with the growth of our community and being in the center of a sea to sky area, a competition-sized pool is essential. We have all these spaces that are building, all these.
Okay, I've allowed you to go on long enough. I
Thank
think
you for
there's
allowing
some,
me to go on.
well, we're off topic and this is midway through the presentation. And we just wanted to have any questions about the floor plans that were
Taking it
asked.
to the public.
We have a whole, Lisa, we're midway through the presentation. We're going to be talking about the scope and all those things in the future, like in the next few minutes. So, Councillor Black and Wolf.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Chappelle. You guys missed the big thing with the pool expansion. I understand staff's predilection to go very cautiously. However, my reflection on that philosophically from a high level is that we're one of the fastest growing communities in BC. We're also somewhat geographically isolated, so we can't, you know, pawn off some of our recreation needs and share with neighboring communities as much as maybe some metropolitan communities can. And for that reason, I actually support a much more ambitious program, and I also think that we need to be very creative about how we fund these. We have a federal government right now that is really injecting stimulus money into infrastructure, and they have funded things like community center and recreation center upgrades. So I think we got to go bigger on this, and you know, with a phased approach that does give you some leeway to you know, work that in over time. But if we're talking 15, 20-year horizons, that's way too long. I mean, we're going to be double the size of our community in that time frame, and we won't be ready. So I don't know. I mean, I appreciate that we finally have something to talk about. We've been asking for this for a few years, and I'm glad to see it with us right now. But I appreciate the concern from my colleagues around the pool, as well as some of the other things. And I do think that we need to look at the fact that we do have a significant amount of land available, and maybe there are some options there that that can be revenue generating. So, you know, happy to see a new rink there. I wish we would have funded that 3 or 4 years ago, but hey, if it's in the next couple of years, then I think we're on the right track. But we really are behind the 8 ball at this point.
Yeah, so some common themes are pool expansion. I think we want to make sure that that's part of the community conversation. That's been said by at least, I think, everyone so far. And additional consideration of airspace, whether it's use of airspace, whether it's for leasing out to begin with, whether it's for expansion, whether it's for other purposes like residential, and present those options to the community.
Thank you. And I was just going to make a comment about the pool expansion, because the feedback I've been getting, I didn't compete in swimming at a young age, but my understanding is that the difference between this pool and a competition pool is 2 lanes, not 25 meters. And I understand with Olympic pools are 50 meters, but back when I was paying attention to that, there were very few 50-meter pools in Metro Vancouver even. They're quite a significant cost and take up space and operating and so forth. What most of the kids seem to be able to compete on is a 25-meter pool, but they have 8 lanes. So I guess that's the question. What is a pool expansion? Is it somehow stretching the thing to 50 meters, which is significant, no doubt? Or is it punching out the west wall and putting 2 more lanes in and relocating the hot tub and the sauna? But I think, I'll echo the comments of other councillors, I think that's something that we want to consider and discuss at this point, because the comments I've been getting about it recently and over the last few years has been around the pool and the pool expansion. And so I think we're going to have to put it on the table and just, I understand the cost issue and so forth, and there's all kinds of different ways to finance these things. But I think first of all we have to figure out, is it stretching it or is it widening it, and what is the practical thing? And it might be, if you're talking about a 50-meter pool, I mean, it might be in a totally different location. I agree with you, there might be other things. We double in size, we might have another one of these things somewhere else in the community as well. The other thing is this airspace thing, and I guess it's possible, but I can see a lot of complications about that. And I think I understand the thought of tying funding for this to some development activity. I think there's other ways we can do that without necessarily trying to do something right on top of this. Maybe talk about another piece of Brennan Park for something else, or we do it in some other location, and or we take CACs towards it. There's all kinds of different ways. I can just see a lot of complications with trying to put something on top of this structure, particularly residential. And so, I mean, it might make sense more for a medical building or physios or something like that, just office space, but that's not a huge moneymaker typically. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I know that's a deeper discussion, but stop there.
Yeah, my impression was always width that was the problem with the pool. Very few communities have an Olympic-sized pool, very few. In fact, only usually Olympic communities. I have Councillor Kent and then Councillor Cryer and then
Thanks. To
Councillor
Doug's point about the CACs, yes, I like that idea. And it doesn't have to be residential, but I think we should make use of the airspace in some way. The pool most definitely, I think, should be included in the expansion in this plan to show. The other thing I liked was Ted's point about where the other rink was located on the far side where the parking lot is. Because to my recollection, we've talked quite a few times about having to repave that parking lot because what's underneath it and the condition that it's in, and having to excavate it all out anyway. And so if we were going to spend X, probably $1 million or whatever to go in there and dig all that out, might it not make sense to put a foundation in and build the rink on that side anyway? Because we're going to have to do that at some point anyway, to go in and fix that parking lot, which is a disaster. So there's that. And the dressing rooms that you have, I would hope that I'm seeing here on the rink side, I'm imagining that those to the right there are the dressing rooms of the new rink in blue. That would be dressing rooms?
Yeah.
So on your concourse side, I would also recommend establishing some kind of more depth into that, to add to additional depth to those dressing rooms that we have for that existing rink, because I'm in there quite regularly, I'm sad to say, and it's very confining when you have a bunch of teams in there jockeying for position and trying to dress kids. So that might be something to consider, is just widening that a bit more and punching back. Thanks.
All right, I do want to move on the agenda. I've got Ted and Susan, and then we're going to move on.
I actually worked on the pool when it was built, and there was public consultation for 6 years on that pool. And so everything from soup and nuts was talked about. Wide, length, all that information should be archived somewhere. It took us 6 years to get the funding for that. First, when you apply, it takes the first year, you don't, your first 3 years, you don't. Anyway, to a couple of points there. Now the airspace, I mean, it's easy. I see airspace over the wellness, 3 levels. So there's a couple of levels of airspace. I mean, that's great. We could also have it over the new administration office, and I don't know, depending on how the rink is designed, over the change rooms and the new concourse area. I do think Karen's point about kids coming from the soccer fields, I think we should somehow make that in this plan, because the kids they're always going to be coming from the soccer fields. And so if it's to the change rooms or just washrooms or whatever, that should be addressed.
Thank you.
All right, Susan, and then we're going to move on.
Thanks, and I agree with a lot of the comments, the parking lot regeneration and removing the log substrate in there. The one point I wanted to bring up is partnerships, is finding partnerships to build. And most of us have mentioned economic generations with second floor space.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on.
Great, thank you. If I could just, I think staff are aligned on the economic generator opportunity, and the idea is to bring us to a place where there's an option, a straw man, to have the discussion with the community, and do we have right? And my belief is that if we have a viable plan, shelf ready, when we have those conversations with the federal government, the provincial government, we're ready to go, and it will advance that cause. So if we are able to move forward and step towards that direction, I think it's much more likely to become a reality.
It's the only way to get the funding.
Thank you. Yes. So back to you, Sean, and I think there's also some more slides that will help frame the discussion.
Yep. Continuing here. So these are some reference images of pre-engineered buildings, except for the top left-hand corner. So actually one of the images, Tim, that you had of the initial rink under construction kind of looked a lot like this. So this is one of the most economical types of construction, which is what we based, or what I asked the cost consultant to base their report on, which is, and you know, this is an example of a pre-engineered building, but it doesn't look like or feel like a pre-engineered building, so there's a lot that you can do with them. It's just a off-site pre-manufactured structure, and easy and quick to assemble, and the most economical to create a large volume space. So we took the opportunity to extrude our base plans into some 3D views. Now this isn't necessarily what the center would look like, but it could look like this. For example, this is a view of the main entry here with that 3-story wellness center addition. That's the new rink in the background. You can see here that a new administrative wing there. So this is a view of potentially of a new main entrance. So just to kind of illustrate what you could achieve with this expansion. So you've got sort of a more transparent view to, or exposure of the complex to the arrival sequence and also to the residential across the street. There's a space in here which is created between the existing, that Tantalus room and the new addition. Sort of could have a bit of a socialization space here with some picnic tables and planting, some trees, sort of a nice welcoming entrance to the building. This is a view from the south. So this is the existing pool, existing gym, existing rink. So that would be the new administrative wing with a covered pool entry here. And then we've just shown some high glazing around the new rink. I sort of instructed the cost consultants to allow for about 10% glazing, so we have some natural light coming into the new spaces. Skylights in all spaces. Here you can see this sort of sawtooth. This is just a sort of a design intent for that concourse to bring in direct north light into that concourse that that leads to the new gym, to the new arena, excuse me. This is a close-up view of what the new pool entry could look like with the administrative wing here. This could be multi-story, like as was mentioned, for additional. You know, if you're building the foundations, you got cheap space if you go up more floors, for sure. If that's you know, going to help the funding model. This is a view from the northeast. So the main entrance is here, the existing arena is here, the existing pool is here. So this is that new wellness center addition, the 3-story addition. So this would be a triple height gym or fitness center space, multi-purpose space. The new arena, that connector concourse. And a sort of closer up view of the wellness center. Just aesthetically, I know this is way further down the road than we're talking about right now, but just to kind of keep that palette, relatively simple palette that it has right now of block work and metal siding, but also introduce some glazing and some wood. And especially wood around areas where people congregate at the entrance, or all entrances, I would say. It's just a nicer, warmer material to use. And
Can we just go back to
yeah.
the overtop one?
Yeah.
I look at this and I see a whole bunch of unused space on top of the roof. And I noticed in the couple one before that the fitness one is a story taller than the existing. Could you put an outdoor track or some sort of fitness running, you know, therapeutic cardio running on top of the existing arena?
We would have to look into that, but.
It just seems like
you
an
can-
unusual
yeah,
bit
yeah,
of
yeah.
space that may be useful. Ted?
Yeah. The space in between the new rink and the old rink. I just want to make sure you write down the fact that we're going to try and tie those two rinks together instead of just having lights, letting light in.
They were writing
Yeah.
notes, yes.
Yeah. And the entrance administration area, you can go 4-story wood frame. I would plan 4-story wood frame. And then the other entrance that you have, there's that long corridor going into, in between the pool and the ice rink, the new ice rink there. Also, that to me is like, just go big high spot in there, and those are two easy places to go high. And because the new wellness center is 3 stories, I mean, that's a huge. And then the final thought I had was, make it as simple as you can, and make it look nice with some landscaping, and keep the costs nice and low so that we can do stuff on the inside.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks. I also think about if we're going to build a second rink and we're going with this model, like if this ends up being what we're taking to the public and we're not thinking about any further building, is build a second rink and then take down our, before we build the fitness center, build the second rink, take down our rink, and because that's the simplest, it's just a square building with an ice sheet in it, and then build a rink and new change rooms, like another new rink and new change rooms and new bleachers, because that's going to be a huge expense, and it's just a box building that's added on anyways, and then build the fitness facility with the, like, that look at air height with the fitness facility, like the tall fitness facility and the new rink on the other side as well. Would that be something that is possible? I mean, I guess it's all possible, but as far as economic modeling, we'd not lose the rink while we build the second one, but at least we'd have a modernized two modernized new rinks instead of one arena that's ghetto and one arena that's brand new with amazing facilities.
We just spent $1 million on a slab, so I don't think we want to lose that investing.
Maybe we can keep this on.
Councillor Chappelle, I think you said it well, that anything is possible.
Right.
And we do have an opportunity to blue sky anything here. Where I'm trying to get us to, and that's why I'm here with you folks, and if you want to nudge us in a different direction, that is great. I'm just trying to get us tethered into the economics that we can make this move forward with our community. And we as we know, we have a lot of facility upgrades that are needed throughout our community. So I'm just trying to keep this, keep the economic costs in the value category. And you can nudge us in a quick direction, and I'd be happy to have that conversation. If we're looking at taking down existing parts of the building, it's going to be more costly than just adding on to the existing building. To renovate is cheaper per square footage, and we can renovate what we have and bring it up. And it's not going to be perfect, but we will have more operational space, recreational space for that value dollar, as opposed to taking it down and rebuilding. We're going to have to get there eventually, but my hope is that that's a 20, 30, 40 year discussion of a rebuild. That's why we're having this conversation today. So if we don't have it right, we need to know.
I really like your idea for the prefabbing of the new rink, because I've been in a few of them with my kids playing hockey, and I've seen how quickly they can go up and how, like these ones that you showed in your drawings here, how good they look, and you would never really actually know that it was prefab unless you studied it. They're quick and they're economical, and you can fill them up pretty nicely. And that's something to bear in mind, as Sue was saying about possibly taking down the old arena when the time comes, is being able to drop it and put in another prefab on that spot, and then connect those two up when it does finally reach the end of its life, because it's quick and it's easy to put up, as opposed to another full-on concrete building.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on, and we'll get to general discussion
So these numbers are really small. I'll hand it to Sean, but there is a handout of the feasibility that will make the numbers a little more easy to read.
This slide has definitely the most information on it of all the slides that we're going to be looking at today. So this is the cost report which was prepared by our quantity surveyors based on the plans that these plans which were given to them a couple of weeks ago. And you probably need to just look at your handouts. Yeah, so what we've done is divided it into phased chunks. The initial, I guess, intent was to divide it into about $10 million chunks, I guess, for phasing. This is divided, in fact, into 3 areas. So the total construction cost is in around 40 million or so. Now before, let me just qualify what is included in these numbers. So a 20% design contingency, which is this is a Class D estimate, which is the most basic cost estimate that you can have done for a building, with very little information, just the plan that we provided and a little bit of information. So there's a 20% design contingency. If the design is simpler, that 20% decreases. If it's more complex, it might be 20%. There's a 15% construction contingency, which probably wouldn't change based on the fact that we're building some new areas and we're renovating some areas. So during construction, the probably price increases or the change orders would be in the order of 10 to 15%. And then there's also a construction escalation of 3% per year, which is the current cost escalation. So if we look at phase 1, which is the concourse and the new arena, for example. So I'm just going to zoom in here. So these are prices which are cost escalated to 2 years from now. So this would be tendered in January 2020. So you can see that there's a rough breakdown here of the new rink, which is almost 19 million, the new concourse about 1.5, then the new concession space and the skate shop, storage areas, and then the canopy. There is actually an entrance to the fields, which could be used for access to the change room. So that's got with a canopy on it, which has a price tag there. And then site development, excavation, and site servicing to that area is itemized here, and it's a line item in all of the separate phases. So now there's no. This is just a best guess. We sort of said, well, if you do that one first, because of the cost escalation, that's the biggest ticket item. So you're gonna, the cost escalation is gonna be less if you build that one first, for example. But there's nothing to say that you couldn't build what we're calling phase 2 first, which is that 3-story wellness center, which is coming in at around 10 million, and that is price escalated to January 2022. And then phase 3 is kind of everything else. It's all the internal renovations to the existing spaces, as well as the fit out of the upper levels of the wellness center. So and also, these spaces can be separated out and done in X number of phases as funding is made available. So this is just a very sort of a broad overview of approximately what the costs for these different items are coming in at.
Is it possible through this engagement process to give people an understanding of what you get for 18 million versus what you might get for 10 million for an arena? Well, it's not
Yes.
necessarily size, it's stadium, it's like, I think people just need
Finishes
to
and,
understand.
yep.
You can get a variable that's borrowed for $6 million, but if you
Yeah.
want to have so just to give people understanding of the different variables.
That's a really good point. So if you can get one for 10 million, let's see it. Don't just sell it, show us the 18 million dollar one.
Yeah, I actually had that conversation with the cost consultant, and he said that you can't get that for 10 million.
Okay,
You could
that was
probably
my
get
point.
it for,
Yeah.
rather than the 20 million, maybe 17 or so at the lower end.
Yeah.
I
But-
just think
Yep.
the citizens need to understand where the variable is, like what you get for $5-6 million bucks and what you might get for 20 and what you might get for 16 or whatever.
Yep.
I don't
Get
know
one
if
for
you judge
5.
that.
Thank you. And what you get for 40 with a way to return your money on housing or other investments, like even just the thought of, using our current Brendan Park but building in the back, or like looking at other space generations. And I don't think I've been vague about my desire to rebuild, Tim, and I appreciate that you're trying to bring something forward quickly and that this is a cost-effective, well, and at 43 million, maybe not a cost-effective, but that looking at a broader model, even just for comparison, be like, and maybe the community chooses renovation, but without something to compare it to, and the economic modeling done. This is economic modeling of, we're gonna build this, here's what it's gonna cost. And even then, I'm looking at some of the substrate costs, and it seems incredibly low for what we're gonna have to build on and renovate, just thinking about the roof and all the roof in the gymnasium, the roof in the current arena are all gonna need redoing. So I just, as far as going to the public, commenting on on what you said, is that, I think that, just that higher thinking of growing by, what our intent is. We have an OCP that says that we can grow 34,000 people just in our small area downtown. Our Brendan Park is not going to be adequate, and I look at smaller communities that have much more. So there's a lot of different modeling, and to me, this is just like, here's an option and this is what it costs. It's not really, here's your high-level thinking, here's longer-term thinking, and here's what we can achieve if we want to go at it right now with a model right now. So I would have liked to see a little bit more differentiation of those models, and not just a retrofit.
And a question, I think to maybe Mr. Buxton or Finance. In our last budget, what was the price to do the work on that parking lot? To dig it out and to fix what's going on under there? Anybody know?
I think it was estimated in
$1 million. Because I hate to be the squeaky wheel here, but I still like the idea. We're gonna have to do that at some point anyway. And I know it alters this plan considerably by moving the ice to the other side. But if you're gonna have to go in and spend $1 million to dig that up anyway, it makes sense to pour concrete in there and put the new arena on that. Or build something on it at very least, because we're gonna have to go in there at some point and fairly soon to fix that. And if you're gonna spend that $1 million, why do it just to put down pavement again?
Thank you. Karen, Linda, just.
So these costs, I was just looking, it excludes soft costs. Are those all the fittings, like chairs, tables?
Yeah, FF&E is not included, so furniture, fixtures and equipment.
And soft costs
Soft costs are also consultant costs, permitting, anything like that.
Okay, but it's all broken down, so like, you can build the wellness center in phase 2, but it's not fit out until phase 3?
Part of it is just the ground level of the wellness center would be fit out in phase 1, or in phase 2, sorry, and then the upper levels in phase 3. At least that's the direction that we've gone. I mean, it can be done all at once.
Okay, and I know there's conversation about what more could we do, but do we have clarity yet on our Crown lease? Like, right now, it's just designated as recreation, so I'm thinking we don't have direction to speak to the community around housing and that sort of
We
thing.
will.
We will have.
We will have by the time we go out.
Okay.
So,
So until we have that information, we can't really talk about.
No, if I might.
No, I think you can talk about it, it's just you have to be clear that you have to get permission from the province to do that.
And the way that it works with the Crown grants currently is if we were to make money off of that, rather than, we would have to get special permission to use that money, otherwise we have to send it straight to the Crown. So it's a 50 of 1, 6, whatever. Where, you know, we either go for grants and get money that way, or we get permission from the Crown, because it's going to be interesting to see how they look at rewriting the Free Crown grant to allow some of these commercial uses or housing. You know, it would be really interesting to see how they're going to deal with it, which is probably why it's taking so long to get an answer back.
Yeah, it's a bit of a
Can't
process.
talk from there.
Yeah.
And it may be specific to
Mhm.
the proposal. They may say yes, no,
That's
or
right,
they may
yeah.
say
Yeah.
That's the answer.
yeah. Excellent. Judd and then Jason.
Thanks. You know, I'm kind of attracted to the idea of one day gutting the existing arena, because I think that's the thing that's going to continue to cost us money. We just need to put a new slab in, etc. Since I've been on council, we've spent a lot of money on that shape. So it seems to me that, and I would not want to clutter this up with that too much. It might be phase 4 one day in the future, something like that. I'll let you figure out how you deal with the pool expansion, what phase you want to put that in. But if we're thinking that one day we might want to do that, or we should do that, then what I would think we should do now is plan on building 2 walls to eventually take the walls of that new arena. And so I'm thinking about the bottom wall, the west wall of phase 2, and the top wall of phase 1. If they were sufficiently engineered and had the right extensions, that one day you come in and clean out everything between them and build one of those buildings, basically just connect the walls. That's not an engineer talking, as you know. So,
It's a good idea, Doug.
but I think if we think that way, that one day we might want to do that, then it would seem to me that if we build the walls now to hold that, that, you know, it's engineered for with foundation, etc., that it would make it a lot simpler one day to do that. So I'll just, as I say, I don't know that we necessarily would want to clutter this up with getting that far into it, because at least for me, I mean, that is definitely not phase 1, 2, or 3. It's something beyond that. But it would be nice to sort of be prepared for that.
But you'd have to consider that in phase 1 and 2 if you're going to build the walls.
There's a costing issue,
Exactly.
absolutely, and a design issue perhaps.
Good suggestion, thanks. Jason?
I'm sorry if I come off as a bit grouchy today. I'm just wondering, this whole wellness center as being in phase 2, I know that in previous times when it was proposed, there was some discussion in the public around, you know, whether that was, I know it says that some surveys indicated that people were interested in it, but it seems to me that the things that are offered at the wellness center there are actually places in Squamish where you can access, you know, gym type facilities and yoga spaces and all of that are offered in the private market. So I'm just wondering, you know, to what extent, like what gap are we covering, given that it's, you know, a $12 million component of the project, and maybe we would want to, you know, focus on the things that we already do and make sure that we're doing those up to their full potential, and some of the things in phase 3 actually address that, right? Like renovation of the existing change rooms, renovation of existing rink, concourse and things like that. So I'm just wondering, you know, is that an appropriate phasing schedule? So that's just sort of throwing an opinion. It's not really a question, but
I think that's a
know
question that
that's,
we can ask the community
yeah,
too.
that's a thing I've heard quite a bit in the past.
Susan? No, sorry, Karen.
through the mayor, I know one of the things as a parent with young kids when I moved to this community is that my kids spent a great deal of time at Brennan Park, and there wasn't really anything for me to do. There weren't classes available and that sort of thing, and so I think the wellness center is there to try and accommodate, in my mind, all ages while you're there waiting for your kids. There's lots of parents that stand around, and you'd love to be doing something else, but right now the space is full of kids, and so you can't do both. You can't exercise and take your kids to a class. So I think there is demand, and I think it'll be interesting to see where the community phases this through the engagement process, how they see the priorities and where the pool fits with that and the wellness center and that sort of thing. So I'll be really curious about that too. So I wouldn't know for sure.
Thanks, Jim. I would agree with those comments, and also that offering specialty classes like neuro and specialty gym time for seniors and that aren't really things that are offered in the community. So, and most community centers do have space where you have gym facilities, but it's not just about, healthy people going to a gym. It's about making sure that it's completely accessible to all members of the community and equitable. One question I had about the auditorium space is we used to have an arts component and an auditorium there. So I'd like to see an art space included in the auditorium refit. If this is going to happen and we previously had art space there, I can't see why the roof again is going to have to be redone. Why not look at even just adding some height on one end so we can have some theater facilities or an auditorium for public use as well. And even bleachers, like if we are looking at number 3, which I agree the phasing may be number 2, however that works in the public, is bumping it out a bit to add some bleacher space so that we can actually have some seating for theater events or any arts facilities. And you can do that fairly low cost. So maybe just some higher level thinking on that as well.
And those questions will go to public.
That's why we're engaging in it's straw man model, straw dog model. Tell us what we can add, take away.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
This is actually the final slide.
Okay. So
Thank you.
the crux of today is we'd like to have, I'm cognizant of time, a discussion with council on the engagement. And we would like to go over the decision statement, some of the values, and have council say thumbs up or have you considered, and get to a place of adoption. But I'm cognizant of the time. Mayor, do you have direction on this?
Yeah, so I guess at this point, the idea is to go to the public. Is the idea now to go out with a variety of these options? Have a bit of a blue sky as well? Like maybe just walk us through exactly, I think a lot of, and you can see councillors champing at the bit to get this going.
Yeah.
I know that we've had a lot of feedback through the budget process on this as well. And of course, we had a lot of feedback at Brennan Park on this. So I think the community is really excited about this. It's helpful to have a launching point for the discussion and communicating that this is the starting point, not the finish point. That it just helps generate the conversation. So how do you see this rolling out as the engagement goes, in terms of the materials that are going to be presented and how it's going to be presented to the public?
Thank you, Mayor, through you. As council, no one understand, we use the IAP2 engagement framework. So through the IAP2 process, working with the decision maker, mayor and council, is to send what is the question, what is the intent of the engagement, so that we're not off on a tangent that perhaps the decision makers aren't lined up with, or just doing too broad-based engagement for the sake of engagement with not really answering the question that needs to be answered. So the idea behind today is to kind of walk through those steps. So once we have the decision statement set with mayor and council, the decision maker, we'll go to a RFP, a request for proposal, and have similar to the OCP, but not to that scale, professional help us design a engagement plan. My hope is that it will be similar to the OCP and engaging in different ways to get the community involved, but not to start off at zero. We want to, as staff, as a project team, have a jumping off point that we can dig a little deeper and be in a place in the next few months where we understand, hey, here's a cost. This is roughly what it's going to cost the community. And we have a level of comfort with the scope of the recreation center, the scope of what can happen at Brennan Park, that staff and council know how to move forward. So that's what we're trying to get out of today. My hope is this could be wrapped up by July. That is an aggressive frame. That is an aggressive time.
Excellent, and I'm just to confirm, council I think would like to make sure the public is commenting on pool expansion.
Yep.
Use of airspace for partnerships or economic opportunities perhaps. Obviously I think we're looking for some creativity from the community too in terms of inputs. I thought council was really good at finding some of those interesting opportunities even within the design. I thought that was, I think Doug and Ted in particular had some really interesting ideas there, but Peter.
One question, is it your intent then to just go out with the one design model, which is 5, or are you leaving that option open for several other design options?
I think we'd want some advice from the engagement specialist. My sense on it is that perhaps we bring forward a preferred option, but that doesn't mean we can't show what the other options might be. You had some great suggestions that we hadn't considered about the rate. So at the end of the day, I think we want to hear from the community. It doesn't necessarily have to be pick option 1 to 5, but here's an idea. Would you prefer? And if we hear 100 people say no, move the rink over here, I think that's something that needs to be considered. To be frank, I'm not sure if the best option is to bring forward 5 options because it might confuse the conversation. Or do we bring 1, or do we bring 2 or 3? My gut on it is maybe 1 to 3, but let's get some expert advice to help direct us.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that 5 options is far too many and confuses the issue, but I think that, and I'm not standing on ceremony for my idea of the parking lot, that's just something I threw out there. However, I do think it's important to show some options rather than just like, this is it, and what do you think? Say, well, what do you see it going on? What do you see? Where would you like to see this? Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, well, let's just quickly, I've got a couple speakers, but I thought I was hearing council with like a number of options, maybe a list of pros and cons or challenges or opportunities with each. And then people can comment on which part of each one like, and maybe out of that comes a 5th option or 6th option. So I don't mind going with more than 3 options myself. But I'm looking for council to comment. I've got Ted and Doug and Karen.
I like the option that's the thriftiest. And then on Susan's point on the economic opportunity, I just wondered how you're going to bring that forward, like potential lease space, or I like hearing staff is talking to properties about figuring all this in our lease. I'm glad we're moving in that direction, but we should have some kind of clear question to the public, like, do you support an added cost for a revenue generator, or whatever way you want to put it? Because I do think that, and I thought it with the police station and with the library and with schools. Every time we build a building, I'm going, where's the extra floors for leasing? So we could go 4 stories above the new office area there. There's a couple places where we can get some height and get some leasable space, and I think it's just, we have to have that question in there somehow so that people can go, oh yeah, I like that idea.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, two things. One, on the options, I think I'd be inclined to put a couple of options, just like you did with us at the start of this discussion, and give your reasons for passing over them. Because I think that was quite helpful, for me at least, and why you like option 5, and then open it up, and maybe we will end up with option 6, which is the merging of all of that. So I kind of like that idea. Now, whether you go with 4 plus the 1 or 2 plus the 1, I mean, if you look at those first 4 options, there were some rather subtle changes. There were a couple that were kind of significantly different, and maybe that's what you focus on if you didn't want to clutter it up too much. The other thing is, I think it's a separate discussion, obviously related, and I think we're going to have to, as a council, come to grips with sort of the funding concept of this thing relatively soon, because obviously it impacts the design at some point, and probably fairly soon. So this idea of putting building above obviously is different than putting building beside or putting the building completely somewhere else, or not even trying to do that. When you talk about lease space, my experience with lease space is that doesn't generate a big lump of capital. That generates a cash flow over time, which might contribute to operating costs, but is not going to contribute to the construction costs. So if you want to go out and sell condos and make a lot of money from that, then you get a big lump of cash, which contributes to the construction costs. So, and whether we want to mess Brennan Park up with all of that stuff at all, or we just look for other funding models to do it. I think it's going to be up to us to have that discussion, as I say, relatively soon, and obviously what the province says about it has one impact, but I think we're going to have to kind of get a concept or a philosophy in our minds sooner than later, so that this thing can go forward in a meaningful way. I'll leave it to you to schedule that.
Yeah, Karen.
So just looking at the engagement plan, there's a piece around sort of what it looks like, but then there's another piece around the Brennan Park vision and goals. And is that taking place separately with user groups, or is that with the whole community? I'm just not totally clear on that.
I would suggest both. It would be happening in parallel. However, it could be happening at the same time. Many of the user groups are going to be the same user groups. For a great example is Christina and I attended a community-driven meeting last night by Brennan Park users, the Parkland users, looking to work together to have some indoor training space. I think there's an eager appetite for them to have us engage with them. And we would also be, before I leave that thought, we would be setting a vision and goals that would give some structure around what is acceptable use at Brennan Park. That would help them in seeking partnerships with either private or public or whatever it might be on what facilities could be possible there. And of course, there's other policy and bylaws that will be providing some guidance that we're trying to have hopefully some black and white answers on, from the flood mitigation to the Crown Land Grant. So all of these things will be taking place at the same time. And again, it's an aggressive timeline, but I think it's important that nobody feel outside of the tent and could potentially throw rocks at it at the end of the day. So let's bring them all together. I think it's two distinct conversations, but it's part of the greater plan or greater discussion.
Yes, one more thing on that. So one thing in the hubs that you mentioned is not to forget the active transit. I know we've got transit in there, but not to forget the active transit piece. And also in the project values. I think one of the values that we've talked about at this table is looking for opportunities to share capital or operating costs with other providers in the community, so the school board or Vancouver Coastal Health. So I know the hospital is looking for space in their ambulatory care. So is that something that we can share in a revised Brennan Park, or more gym space for schools, or I don't know, but as part of this, I think one of our values has to be to engage with other partners to see what they might want to use this space for as well. So we don't miss that opportunity.
not just partners that currently exist in the facility, but new potential partners. Yeah. Susan?
I'm just thinking a lot about what Councillor Ray said about funding models. And I think this is one of the biggest concerns with the retrofit for me. Because I think that with the retrofit, it ends up being really expensive because you're trying to work with what you have and make it stable and healthy and usable when it's in a, all I can think about is the crap that falls in my mouth when I play hockey. And just like, it really bothers me thinking about retrofitting a really unhealthy building. I think about sustainability goals, that our building doesn't meet any sustainability goals. We don't meet any LEED standards. We don't meet any standards. So bringing this plan without an option for rebuild, and as, Councillor Race likes to say, I was a lawyer. I think about financial planning a lot these days because of my degree. And I think about new economic models and partnerships and generation and offering, 43 million is a lot. And I just, without having another model beside it that says, here's a new model next door, it's like $5 million more, but you get a new space and new facilities. We still build the cheaper version of the ice rink, but we have the economic modeling to support our assumptions. And this plan does not bring me any other economic development models other than here's some retrofits, it meets the community needs for a little while, but it doesn't actually build something that's going to be future thinking. And I recognize in myself that I often think too far in advance in the future for economic development modeling. But right now, I see that we're out of school space. Like the other partners in our community are thinking about space. Schools are thinking about space, and not just public schools, but other schools. There's going to be other economic development models in a newer space where you can actually use height. And I recognize also that we would have to go to Crown but I also see that other government levels are thinking about economic development and recognize that old spaces are going to be needing revision, and that economic modeling and long-term sustainability has to be a part of our plan. So with that, I would like to, even if it's just a question, if you go with this plan, I want to see a question that recognizes that the community might want to look at a bigger and more future-oriented plan with better economic development models. Even if it's like, here's a space that we could put a future building, are you interested in a renewed Brennan Park as opposed to retrofitting an old Brennan Park?
So before you go on, the conversation,
I'm done.
The conversation has been fulsome, and it sounds like this is what exactly some of the questions we're going to come to the public with. You've heard that clearly?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I'm not sure what Councillor Chappelle is talking about in terms of stuff falling in her mouth. But if our arena is actually shoving stuff into people's mouths if they're on the rink, can you bring that back to council for understanding? So just it's been said a few times, and I just imagine someone standing there like this. But either way, I mean, if I think we'd like to understand the condition of the arena. So just looking at Camilla to maybe bring that back in the future. Okay, so you've heard us.
Yes.
I think funding is obviously the biggest component of all this. Partnerships, grants, a whole bunch of different things, economic opportunities, all that is part of the conversation. And I think we're going to frame this as just a launching point for the community.
Correct.
To get their feedback. I bet you they're going to have all sorts of great ideas that we haven't thought about already. And then you have to ground truth it all in costs, as Councillor Pryor has made the excellent point, that this has to be affordable to the community. We can't be building ivory towers for no reason. Okay, we're good?
Should we have a
Yeah.
motion?
There's a motion.
So I would suggest it's the motion with the amended suggestions from council. Specifically, what I heard, just to reiterate, was around the appetite for the community.
So, Tim,
Oh,
I'm
please.
gonna ask you to, we're gonna just put this on hold. I'm gonna
Okay.
ask you to go back and rewrite a new motion. Because
Okay,
I don't think we want to endorse the decisions. I think we want you to craft a new motion based on what you've heard.
Okay.
Just so we hear, and we'll bring it back later in the meeting. So if you can go do that now, that'd be great.
great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Why don't we take a 3-minute break? We'll,
It was
we're
blue
gonna
sky
go quickly
and
back
minus
to
10. Perfect.
the Brennan Park Recreation Center Community Engagement. And Tim has drawn up a new resolution. I'll just read it off to the committee. The council endorsed the decision statement, scope of engagement, and set the level of engagement at involved for the public engagement of renovations and expansion, Brennan Park Recreation Center, as presented February 2018, with the additional feedback from council, pool expansion, use of airspace, higher stories, revenue generating opportunities, partnerships, consideration of arts in event space. Options presented should include most cost-effective options and cost comparison with brand new facility, and that council endorsed the decision statement, scope of engagement, and set the level of engagement. Oh, we've already sort of said that.
But that's for
That's
Brennan Park.
That's for the.
Oh,
that's
and
right.
involve the public engagement to define a common vision and goals for Brennan Park, as presented February 20.
I guess we'll get that next week.
Any, did we miss anything? Okay, moved by Peter, seconded by Ted. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you,
Give
Ted.
that to Terry, please.
Good for me. We are on to the draft community contribution policy, 3.2. Gary.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Gary Buxton, General Manager here at the district. Draft CAC policy that you have in front of you is it's changed quite a bit. It hasn't changed quite a bit from the last time you saw it on October the 3rd. At that time, sort of the basic strategic direction was that smaller rezonings pay cash in lieu, the larger rezonings physically construct and provide affordable housing. The reason being, we have limited resources and expertise and land that the development industry, building industry has. So the intent was to leverage new development to produce a share of all new developments as affordable housing, and where the cash in lieu is that to fund critical facilities, which are outlined as a definition of that. The new policy it looks to have changed a lot, but that essential direction is really unchanged. Smaller units, cash in lieu, smaller applications, cash in lieu, larger units, physical provision. For a number of reasons. Principally, of course, we held a workshop late November with the development industry. I was the least popular guy in the room that day. There was some pushback, particularly on particularly the threshold at which the change was made. The requirement to physically provide units could be problematic in a rental, an entirely for sale project, in which case we would essentially have to be buying units or dealing with purchaser units, and something that frankly I had missed. So it did raise some interesting issues that I've tried to address in these revisions to the policy. There was some pushback from the industry around the greenfield provisions and the fairness and equity of that, but I've left those unchanged at Council's direction and tried to provide a little bit more clarity on what greenfield means. So, did I say there are a number of substantive amendments, but really the essence of the policy hasn't changed. In terms of the more significant changes, the threshold from which you shift from the cash in lieu focus to the provision focus is set now at 50 rather than 20. That frankly makes a lot more sense. So the minimum number of units we're going to get is 5. So that's the minimum number increment. It's the smallest increment of housing we will be dealing with on an individual project, rather than potentially 1 or 2 units in the smaller application. So we would take cash in lieu for the smaller. So the applications below 50 units contribute cash in lieu, while the applications above 50 are asked to contribute physically. but also to provide an allowance for cash in lieu, which in the interim allows us to take cash rather than having to sort of take for sale or purchase units, while we get our housing corporation in some form set up. The quid pro quo, so to speak, is that the cash in lieu amount increased from $6 to $11. That substantially increases the amount that's collected under the policy. And I did a scan of a number of Metro CAC policies. Some have them, some don't. If you don't see them, they probably don't have one, or it's hidden so well I can't find it. And they're all over the place in terms of how they collect. Some of the more sophisticated ones are really DCC policies. They've got all of their amenities that they want lined up and assessed and collected the same way as we assess our DCC policies. Really quite sophisticated. Others are entirely different, and it's tough to get to the rationale as to how they got to their numbers, but the numbers vary from, say, for anything from $1.15 a square foot based on a 1,200 square foot unit, and it's a rough and ready comparison up to anything as high as 140. That's in probably the most exclusive, expensive part of North Vancouver. So at 11, we're near neither the highest nor the lowest. I hesitate to say we're in the middle because there's really no sort of rhyme nor reason to those numbers that I can see.
A number of them had it wrapped up in density bonus as well. Like it was.
Some do.
Yeah.
A couple of them that I can recollect at least have it wrapped in it. It's coupled with a density bonusing program. I think Port Moody might be one of them. As I say, everyone seems to do it a little differently. Now the cash in lieu for purpose-built market rentals, I suggested we reduce to $3 per square foot and the physical provision rate to 5%. Rental projects are inherently linked to local incomes. I mean, if you're going to provide a rental unit and set it above market, you're probably not going to rent it. Now, whether or not that market rate is affordable is a different question, but it is at least in some ways indexed to local incomes. So this, I think, is a real. I've suggested this to put as little hindrance or blockage or opposition to purpose-built rental housing. And I think that's part of a robust discussion we could have as to whether or not this is the right thing to do, or whether or not there should be any CAC for market rentals. I think we should have that discussion, because if we want to make that as easy as possible, then minimizing or eliminating the CAC for purpose-built rentals is something that I think is worthy of consideration. But right now it's sort of set at half what it used to be and half of the rate that we're asking for other units to be provided at. One of the other changes is there's a request around active transportation and park amenities for residential rezonings. So we've clarified that those should be items that are in our active transportation and parks and recreation master plan, so part of our existing priorities. And provided a cost per square foot, because the development industry said quite rightly, well, what does that mean? How much or what am I expected to give? So the $1.50 per square foot additionally is sort of a proxy for the amenity, the transportation and park amenity value should be roughly in those areas, so they're prorated to the size of your development. But it gives a guide for what the cost of providing those amenities should be, or a simple fee for the cash in lieu provisions. And I did quickly. I did quickly look at the impact of. Cursor, there it is.
You did make a comment earlier about the inclusionary zoning, and that not requiring that until we have a housing corporation set up. These units will take a couple of years to get built. if they're coming in today or next year or 6 months from now. And I suspect we're gonna be well on our way of having a housing corporation by then, I hope we are. So why would we not, like, these things take a while to get built, so why would we not consider the inclusionary piece right up front? More
I'm concerned, our intent is to have the corporation or the housing authority, or whatever we're going to call it, probably up and running in some form this year. So we've got somewhere to place this issue. It's really around the for sale units that I'm a little concerned about, because that's a capital outlay for the district. Yes, we can get it back through resale of those units, but it's something that is a little bit more difficult to set up. So I think the policy that I'm putting forward right now, I think it's the right now policy. It may not be the right policy in the longest term, but I think it gets us through this year, and I think we should be looking at it again next year.
Okay.
So I'm not anticipating this is a policy that council will hold for 3 to 5 years. I'm thinking if we get 18 months out of this without opening it again. But in terms of the, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, keep going. Are we just, Mayor Burr has arrived, so we were gonna break this topic and do Mayor Burr's
I can certainly.
presentation. So I just wanted to, tell me when there's an intuitive time to break.
Why don't I get through the next 2 points, and then really that's the summary of my discussion.
Okay, and then,
The only other major change, I mean, there are separate provisions that have been created, but we've tried to minimise those provisions so that it's really going into affordable housing. Council's making a decision at the point of sort of contact to put it into the affordable housing provision or the critical amenities provision, and then council can use it for whatever, essentially whatever they so deem, and it's not targeted, it's not the developer says it's going here, it's council's making that decision where to put it, so you will decide where those funds go. So it's affordable housing or critical amenities. Section 6 has been amended to provide, to allow for deferral to latter stages such as occupancy, decreasing the financial impact to the developer. So the district, we're going to have to secure our interests through alternate provisions related to occupancy or through calendar dates in the land development agreement. It's just allowing us some more flexibility that will make it a little easier for the development industry to financially manage these CAC contributions. And I did a quick analysis of the financial analysis, and maybe I'll bring it up once I can get the spreadsheet to come up, but essentially it's about 108% increase looking at other projects in terms of the financial sort of impact of this if it's pure cash in lieu. So it's substantial, and the amount that we may collect are substantial. So really I think it's a 1 to 2 year dynamic policy that this will carry us through. Then we're going to come back at it again perhaps next year if the housing corporation's in operation, and come back and look at this again. Subject to the discussion with council, then I would suggest a final round of consultation with the industry roundtable and then bring it back to council.
so why don't we, is that a good place to break?
Yeah.
And then we'll come back and have more
Sure,
questions and conversation. Okay, so we're just gonna table this topic and invite our guest. Mayor Burr from Lions Bay is here. You have your
Thank you very much
presentation
for
on
having me. I apologise somewhat for my casual attire.
If we're in committee.
Yes, we're out there.
Who is this guy?
This is Squamish.
He just was skiing and he's gonna gloat about it a
Yeah,
little bit.
I'm juggling 2 sets of out-of-town guests, and so I'm doing a lot of skiing. It's terrible. Is it fairly obvious what I do here?
That's done. Let's go in.
Well, maybe I'll just set this up a little bit as Carl is with technology over there. Carl and the Mayor Burr and the Village of Lions Bay have been working on this average speed over distance concept for a year and a half now. The conversation has gained some traction recently in the media. There's Victoria and the Capital Region is also looking at a potential pilot project for this technology. And we discussed it quite a bit when the mayors met here, I guess about a month ago now. And so I thought it was worthwhile that Mayor Burke come and bring council up to date on exactly what this technology is and where it's been successful, and get some feedback from council on where we want to move forward.
Great, thanks Patty. Yeah, so I mean that's a good introduction, and the rest is sort of fairly, the narrative follows, so I'll just jump right into it. Lions Bay has a problem, and there you see some graphic representation. Road closures, serious accidents, and I put those motorcycles in there on purpose, and you'll be hearing that theme recurring through the discussion. This is the nub of the problem. The top dotted blue line is actual 85th percentile speeds through Lions Bay. We've marked, this is from Modi Highway Performance Review. It's done using Google speed data. They essentially, if you have a Google phone, an Android phone, or you're logged into Google Maps, they track your speed all over the world. And they will sell you that data. So this was done by Modi for us. So you see our three main interchanges there, Brunswick Beach, which is to the north. Isleview is what Modi calls Lions Bay Avenue and Kelvin Grove. So you can see where the speed limits change from 90 to 70 to 60. The 85th percentile, which as you may or may not know, and I'll go into some detail in a sec, is what highway people tend to see as the speed used by the majority of drivers that is suitable to the conditions. So as you can see where Modi has designated the speeds to be 70 and 60, people are actually doing somewhere between 100 and 110. This is most people. In fact, if you look at the bottom red line, you'll see that nobody does the speed limit. So, repeating myself, the logic follows that the 85th percentile people are doing way over the speed limit, and the accident rates are so high that we know the 85th percentile is too fast. So we have to get the 85th percentile down. So here are the things that cause me a lot of angst. These are PDO accidents, so this is no injuries and no fatalities. You can see there's a significant concentration around Lions Bay. The size of the icon represents somewhere between 1 and 2, or 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. I tried very hard to get this to actually mean something. So I zoomed out. You can see right at Lions Bay, if you can see the Brunswick Beach and Lions Bay indicators, we essentially have accidents everywhere. These are the injury accidents. Very similar pattern. These are individual accidents in which one or more people are injured. Same scale. So the smallest icon is 1 or 2, the middle icon is 3 or 4, and the larger icon is 5 or 6 incidents within a 100-meter stretch. But because of the uncertainty in my handy-dandy mapping method, it's within 200 meters on the map, but representative. And these are the ones that are really the problem. This is fatalities in the last 6 years since the highway was redone. That's 2010 through the end of 2016. It's the latest data. They haven't done 2017 yet. Between Horseshoe Bay and Squamish, Lions Bay has had 7 fatalities. This is costly, obviously, in the human terms, and after each one of these incidents, council receives a delegation of some very heartbroken people. It really, really gets your attention when people come and say, please do something. So we're doing something. So those are the same, if you're not a graphic person, here it is in numbers. So we see Lions Bay proper as from these Modi indicators, about 6 kilometers. It's somewhat arbitrary, but I chose our fire service area, which runs from Eagle Ridge Drive, that's the bend to the top of Furry Creek Hill. So that's 21% of the distance, 70% of the fatalities, and half of the injuries at PDOs. It's too much. Why? Because the 85th percentile speed, the speed that most reasonable people are doing, turns out to be too fast, and they find it out too late. So the accidents are the obvious ones. We have two other drivers, and this is where you guys come in. I showed you those motorbikes for a reason. On any fine day, not just summer day, but non-rainy day, we have platoons of motorbikes coming through there at 5,000 rev and somewhere between 120 and 160. Why? Because it's a chicane and it's quite fun. People are literally crying on my shoulder. It is increasingly debilitating. Why? Because traffic's growing 15% a year. More and more and more motorbikes are coming through there way too fast. The other one is where Paddy started getting interesting. Obviously, if there's an accident at Lions Bay, people stop there. The bad ones, the 8 and 9 and 10 hour ones, means Whistler doesn't have a ski day if it's that season. You guys don't see the traffic coming this way. They get stopped at Lions Bay, and it happens way too often.
And we all have residents who drive through there on a daily basis.
Well, I don't need to tell you that the traffic right now, there's 19,000 vehicles a day on average. And that's pretty evenly split between weekend and weekday because it's a different kind of driver. So it's commuters during the week and tourists during the weekend. That's a lot of people, and that is going through Lions Bay. So that is coming to Squamish. And maybe they go further, maybe they stop in Squamish. But that's a lot of people to get impacted. You know, you're starting to talk about orders of magnitude similar to the big bridges in Metro. So it's growing 15% a year. So it's increasingly impacting all of us. It impacts us in terms of noise, which I've touched on. Also, our fire department is servicing serious accidents, gets really emotionally damaging to them. We have, after every fatality, we have one volunteer firefighter or more quit because it's just too much, especially when it's young people. So there's the simple logic. The high accident rate tells us that the speed is too high and it needs to come down. So I'll just run through some of these quickly. We have done something already, and so we put that slow down sign up. Apparently the best practice these days is in fact better than the your speed is sign. It apparently works better. And our fire department reports that in fact does seem to be better. Anecdotally, we don't have data, but it seems they think people are slowing down, and in fact that we have fewer accidents for some sort of distance beyond that. Modi's tried everything. You probably wouldn't have noticed, but our speed limit signs are big. Much bigger than normal. Don't know if that worked. The thing that was interesting to me was the third point, and that is we had RCMP and integrated road traffic safety people sit visibly at Lions Bay on bridges for 2 hours for 2 successive days. Not hiding behind the speed sign or behind a tree trying to catch somebody, sitting there visible. And there was no noise from motorbikes because they all came puttering through there setting up because it was 60. And there weren't any accidents, maybe there would have been, had we not been doing it, I don't know, but the experiment was for noise. And as you probably know, we replaced the vegetative median. The original concept for the vegetative median was to provide a visual cue to slow down. That was the intention. That didn't seem to work. What seems to have worked is the barrier itself. People are definitely going through there slower. Maybe they think it's narrower. Maybe the barrier tells them that you need to be a little more careful here. Something has happened that gives them a visual cue to slow down. The barrier has been hit. It's been up for just about 6 months. It's been hit about a dozen times. We don't have stats yet, but the fire department reports that. And one crossover. Didn't hit anything. So something we're doing is working. Unfortunately, we don't know what yet. So the blue is the hours spent on the highway by our fire department in our service area, which runs from the Bend to Very Creek. And as you can see, it was growing. It represented more than half of the hours that our fire department spent on calls. Last year, it went to less than half of the year before. It's a good result. I don't know if it's a trend. I don't know if it's an aberration. Don't know. But I'll take it. That's the same data as a trend line. So as you can see, I started getting very interested in January of 2016 and July of 2016 and January of 2017 because that line was going up. Now it's turned around. I don't know why yet. Okay, so I won't read through all of those except the final point, which is every speed over distance technology. We had presented this to the previous provincial government. We didn't get very far. It was felt by them to be akin to photo radar. And photo radar was anathema to the Liberal government, and in fact Gordon Campbell managed to get himself re-elected by promising to do away with photo radar. So they were not very interested in photo radar. This is not photo radar. How it works is by taking a picture of the car into a zone and out of a zone. You know exactly what the distance is, and hence you can calculate the average speed. Pretty simple stuff. Typically it's done by license plate recognition, but other technologies have used Bluetooth, onboard Bluetooth, and corroborated by weight sensors in the pavement. So they essentially recognize the car and work out its average speed over a distance of, I've seen them 120 kilometers in Australia, 6 kilometers in Europe. The proposition here is, you'll see where we're going with it. So this is what they look like. They're not beautiful, it's true. The one in the top left is in the UK. The next one, 120, that's in South Africa. The next one is in Norway. The one at the bottom is also in South Africa, and the one in the bottom left is the UK. Here are some more. These are all in Australia. Not beautiful, but more beautiful than an accident. And it works. This is the experience on the A9, which is in Scotland. So you can see where they introduced it about March 2013. Took a while for people to get the message, about a year. And now everybody does the speed limit. So the 10% that's doing over the speed limit, I suspect, are tourists or people who don't believe it, or what, because you are going to get a ticket. It applies to all traffic all the time. Okay, so the different bars are just the different sections. This is from, they actually put up an authority to run average speed of distance on the A9. And I don't know if you heard the interview that Paddy set up with CBC. They actually talked to the Scottish Minister of Transport about this experience. He said all the right things. So I'm not going to go through this, but it's done in a lot of places. The results are unequivocal. In some places they are even better than others. Don't know why yet. I'm not the advocate for the technology. Modi would have to find out exactly what works best. Why? Is it a single zone? Do you allow multiple speed zones? Don't know. It has gained some traction in BC. In fact, I only found out by, I think I read it in the paper of all places, of modern media, that the CRD is looking at doing exactly this for the Malahat. For very similar reasons, accident rates are too high because people speed. And they have just now gotten the Minister of the Attorney General, Solicitor General, has said that if they can get some sort of traction with a sort of a survey, they may do it. Now, I'm not sure that a survey is not just kicking the can down the road, but anyway, that's what they've done. So I've got a lot of FAQs. I'm not going to run through all of them, promise. It's not photo radar. These are all the objections that I've heard, that the FAQ sections of all these authorities that run ASOD, average speed over distance, the objections are all the same. And so I've just summarized them here. The second one is the one I really like. It's not another. We don't want any fines. We don't want to fine you. Please slow down. So when I'll leave this with you, and so these are, we hear them all. So this is more for our friends at Modi. There's lots of research. The vendors all have things, academia, a lot of work being done, including at UBC and so on. So this is the Lions Bay piece. We advocate the use of average speed over distance in BC. I don't know, but I suspect the legislation may be already in place, or at least partly in place, for red light cameras, which means, just to point out the obvious, that they're actually sending a ticket to the owner of the vehicle, not the driver, which has been a problem in other regimes. And certainly we know that they know how to recognize license plates. We did it until quite recently. And then we're asking Modi to consider a pilot in Lions Bay. I forgot to mention that Modi the change is imminent. They're going to do away with the 60 section through Lions Bay. We're going to go from 90 to 70 back to 90. Why? I showed you the graph. Nobody does it anyway. The speed limit is irrelevant. What is relevant is the 85th percentile. And what the 85th percentile is through Lions Bay is 110. So let's give them a speed limit that they may find more believable, and maybe a few more people will try and adhere to 70, because they sure as heck are not adhering to 60. I heard one objection that we're trying to make money out of it. We are not. We don't get to share in the traffic fine revenues thing because we're not big enough. And there you have it.
I have a few speakers. I thought the Scottish minister's comments on the CBC were quite interesting, and he had gone through all the objection and basically their projects disproved every single one of them, really. And the other piece that he didn't mention, but you mentioned to me, was it actually helps with capacity.
That's right. I mean, the experience has been, and I think they've noticed this in South Africa particularly, is in fact, I happen to be South African, as you may be able to discern from my failed Canadian accent, but I wasn't aware of it until 3 years ago when we were in South Africa, and there's all these average speed corridors everywhere. And lo and behold, everybody's doing the speed limit. So that really means that there's no need to overtake, there's no need to get ahead. So you really can, because the speed is consistent. The research shows that the frustration arises from unpredictability of journey time and drivers doing variable speeds. So this actually solves that. So you actually get a double whammy for putting it in. Not only do your accidents go down, but you actually get more consistent journey times and higher road capacity.
Thanks. I got 10 to
Yeah, thanks. Well, I was going to question if you had the opportunity to just do it in just Lions Bay. And if we were going to do it, I mean, we have problems between here and Whistler as well. Would we be looking at the whole corridor? Are you looking just for support for you, or are you asking us to say, let's do all of it?
Yeah, okay, so I probably should have touched on that. This is really just for information. It's just to let you know what your neighbour to the south is up to. The Scottish experience was an interesting one. So the A9, they ran into all those common objections. When they did it on the A37, the next one, people welcomed it because they realized it really, really worked. The idea, you don't get tickets. You just have to drive the speed limit. Now, there are some that say the speed limit through Lions Bay is artificially low, and 60, that's proven by the fact that they do it. But I tell you, it's not that too low because our accident rate is 2 and 3 times what it should be. So I also hear people saying, that's one of my FAQs that I need to put in. I've heard it from our own MLA. I can drive that highway much faster than everybody else because I'm so familiar with it. But everybody thinks they can drive very fast until they crash. So I don't know how Modi would implement it. We have a problem that we're trying to solve. Too high accident rate, and there's an ancillary benefit to us, it's the noise. Specifically motorcycle noise in the summer or during good weather. But I can see, especially here, from Cleveland up to Duffy Lake, I guess, there's so many speeds, and you have to keep your eye. One of these friends that I was skiing with just today said he came through here and he never knew what speed limit he was supposed to be doing because it changes so often. So in the end, he just did 90 because he thought that was about right.
And I think the idea of doing a pilot project, and this is where the Capital Regional District is, let's do a pilot project here, get some data, do some analysis, see if there's proof of the effectiveness of this. Similarly, Lions Bay, use that as a pilot project. And then determine where these safety zones may be throughout the province, let alone throughout Sea to Sky.
Yeah, I mean, this is, yeah, it's absolutely right. This is a safety issue. It's a zone, it's a corridor, it's known, it's posted. It really is, it's a whole different approach than the current speed enforcement approach, which is to hide behind the tree and see if you can catch somebody.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's a gotcha. And this is not that. So, you know, the day the police get it will be the day that they park in plain sight. But this is not policing. This is a safety corridor, and we'll help you, and you know, it will be extremely well signposted. I've seen it in Europe, for example, where there's interim reminders that say, license plate XYZ, you are going too fast. Of course, they say it in French or German, so you're saying, what the heck was that? I hope that's not me. Because, of course, you don't know your license plate because you're in a rental. But be that all as it may, this really is a driver assistance tool rather than this is a compliance tool rather than an enforcement tool.
Thank you. I'm glad you spoke to the 60 kilometers because I was speaking to an RCMP officer who works in doing enforcement in Lions Bay, And he was basically saying that because people have to slow to 60, the corner, the most dangerous corner and where most of the accident happen is when the speed limit changes to 80, people actually gun it because they were going slow, and then they gun it and then get into accidents coming around the corner and aren't able to handle. The most complicated part of the road is where the speed actually increases. So I'm really happy to hear you say that they're going to even that out, and I wonder if 70 is even enough to, you know, make that happen, if it needs to be actually adjusted to road conditions. And since the vegetation was taken down as well, vegetation causes accidents on the road, because it in the fall it sheds its leaves and becomes extremely slippery, which is really horrible for motorcycles and causes a lot of accidents as well. So
Yeah, well, so you actually raised quite a few valid points there. So one of the big challenges in Lions Bay is the speed differential. So some people are doing 60. The fuddy-duddy mayor and maybe about 3 other people on a day. And some people are doing 110. So that's a very wide speed differential, and we see a lot of the accidents caused by that. Modi will never increase the speed on a road by more than 10 at a time, because they want to do it in steps to see what happens. Even this one has not quite passed the bar, so the chief engineer of Modi still has to sign off on it. They've done their technical modeling and it seems to work. 70 is about right through Lions Bay. And why do I say that? Because the cameras are negative in some cases, the sight lines are bad, and the ramp, ons and off ramps, anything more than that, as it is, I have to slam on anchors once a week because somebody didn't move over and I've run out of ramp and now I have to wait. So maybe it'll be 80, I don't know, but it's certainly going to start out at 70 and we'll see how it will go. The idea there is to come up with something a little more believable. The problem really is in Lions Bay is it looks like a freeway. There's overpasses and ramps and it's quite wide, but it's not. It's designed as a rural highway. And that 60 was not arbitrary, that 60 was chosen. The highway was designed to the speed limit, not the other way around.
Thank you. Can I just go ahead with that? I also find the idea of a pilot project odd. The research has already been done. It's clear and well supported that this works. Instead of just calling it a pilot project, why wouldn't you just implement something that works and does well in an area of high accidents? So I fully support this going in, and it's just...
Well, the answer is we're all politicians around this table, right? It's going to be billed as a pilot to start with. Just to sort of...
Fair enough.
To make it more palatable. Clearly it works. We just need to bring it forward in such a way. And so this is where Patty's already been incredibly helpful, because she's actually a mayor of a real municipality rather than a pretend municipality. We need to get in front of the government, and they need to understand it's not photo radar. And we're gaining some traction there. So, and it's sort of a dual thing. It's the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Transport that we have to work out together.
Karen and Ted and Doug.
Member, are you putting forward a motion at UBCM on this issue that we could?
I hadn't even contemplated of that.
At least have a very vocal conversation about it and encourage pilot projects around the province. And certainly, Capital Region District would be there to support it, I think. And
do you think that would have?
I think we're hoping to get this moving before September. With that's my druthers.
Yeah, that may be a backstop to do it at UBCM.
Just to continue the momentum.
At least, if it doesn't get anywhere between now and there, it's a really big forum in which to educate a lot of politicians.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I hadn't even thought about that.
So, and the other one is the LMLGA is coming up faster. And they're receiving resolutions now. So there might be a way to at least get the conversation started and
do you think that, that couldn't hurt, right? Or could it hurt?
I don't, and LMLG is an interesting one. It's not only a resolution, but maybe there's an opportunity to actually do a session.
Do a little forum like this?
Yeah. Look at this, Karen's on the board, that's why I'm nodding on this.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And it was something to consider.
Can you get us in?
Pardon?
Can you get us in? On the agenda?
Certainly, yeah. And Jack's the other one, who's chair of the conference, Jack Compton and this is. So anyway, it's something for your council to consider and look to at least Lower Mainland to try and sponsor something up.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, good.
Ted and Doug and Peter.
Yeah, I don't mind calling it a pilot project. It might be easier to get it off the ground. I know the difference between going the speed limit and speeding is about 5 minutes. That's no way to save. So
Over what distance?
from here to Ocean Bay.
Yeah, that's conventional wisdom, right? We all know that, but you want to push it. If you think you can go a little faster, why not? Because it saves you 5 minutes a day.
I used to have a girlfriend in Vancouver, so I know exactly how long.
Even more important driver, yeah, than getting to work.
Anyway,
And it's starting to get slower and slower.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I broke up with her. So. No, but and then as I got older, I drive.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
I drive the speed limit now.
Well, so do I.
To teach my kids.
Well, maybe I don't do 60 through Lions Bay, but I certainly do 70 because that's about right in Lions Bay.
Well, with the pilot project in Lions Bay, that'll show results. I mean, if it's the whole highway, I do think because there's some long stretches, there could be some different areas that are 90.
Well, I have seen, Australia does it this way, I think Norway, don't quote me on the Norway one, they have multiple speed limits, 60, 70, 90, 70,
Yeah.
60, and they know the distance and they use the absolute shortest distance that you could travel if you changed lanes all the way to not shortchange you on the distance,
Yeah.
and they work out to maintain each of those speeds between the speed limit signs and what your journey time should be.
Yeah.
And so it's not locked to one speed only.
I do think that we should push to do it all the way to Whistler, and I know Whistler would probably bitch at it, but you know, we've lost quite a few people on that highway between here and Whistler, and just to your point on that alone is reason to do this.
This is step number one.
Well, similar question, I guess I'm wondering, has this gone to the minister, not the ministry yet? And are the other mayors in the corridor that were at that meeting, are they in line with this?
Well, let Patty handle the second part first.
I think there was some interest for sure. I think there was some skepticism expressed about it feeling like photo radar, so I think there's a lot of education that has to be done there. I think Whistler's concerned about perception that their visitors may get if they all get safety tickets or speeding tickets, however you want to articulate it. But I think there was a willingness to understand the opportunity, but there's education to happen for sure.
I was one of those people that never understood what was wrong with photo radar, but it seemed to work.
I think you're in the majority. Everybody I talk to would welcome a return to photo radar, but it's a vocal minority that got on the soapbox and managed to get some traction. So this is not photo radar. And the idea is, Patty, nobody gets a ticket.
Exactly.
There'll be no tickets. People just drive the limit. So now whether there needs to be some adjustments of the limits, that's a technical question for the Ministry of Transport. So to answer the second question, the first part of the question, Doug, yes, I have presented this to the Ministry of Transport, to Minister Trevena, not to the Ministry of Justice, but the Ministry of Justice is now aware of it through the CRD. We've been sharing our presentations back and forth for the last 18 months.
Solicitor General?
Yeah.
David Eden.
No, the other guy.
Solicitor General.
Oh, not the
Farnworth.
Farnworth, yeah.
Yeah.
Peter.
I really support this. I think it's great. Like everyone here, I drive that highway and you're over on the right-hand lane and people are pushing behind you from there. And I think to the bikes, you get a lot of people, you get a few that are skilled riders. You also get a lot of people that just want to come up, but they don't have a lot of riding ability, and yet they find that piece of road, they want to push it in there, and that's where you get those accidents. It's a lack of experience riding at those kind of speeds. And I think something like this would really help to bring that down. Because they come out and it's like, oh, it's this beautiful long stretch of highway, they can dial it up and just go.
Nobody lives here.
And and the problem is in those turns, that chicane that you're talking about in there is a real key piece to dropping those bikes. They get coming into that turn and they realize they're not going to make it at that speed, and they're down. And even experienced riders find it a little exciting when they push it in there, let alone guys that don't have that experience.
That comes from a guy that jumps semis.
Any other thoughts on this? I'm hearing generally that council thinks this is a good idea to explore, and we want to be partners and do this with Lions Bay. So I'm just scribbled down a motion for the committee to consider that Squamish Council support the average speed over distance concept and work with Lions Bay and other governments to initiate a pilot project in Lions Bay with an eye to implement throughout the province. Something like
Corridor. Skip the province, just worry about us.
No, I'll call the problem.
Well, I
Quarter
think
and the province.
it's a pretty big fish to fry.
I think the only thing with the province is that then we can really partner with CRD, and I think there's other governments as this gains momentum. They're gonna wanna, we don't wanna limit it, anyway. Did you get that? I do, I'll write it out in legible. Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor Park.
Well, you know, to that point, it's like gun control in the States. I mean, once you start trying to push it everywhere, there's gonna be big pushback. It'll be one of these things that's talked about and pushed off the side of people's desks. And I think it's really valid that we represent our constituents, the Sea to Sky Highway. There's no getting around it. You can't go another way, you know. I just think that we should focus on ourselves, talk about the other communities, but you start talking province.
We are first talking about a pilot project in Lions Bay.
That's right.
And that's the start.
Yep.
Get
I think the
data.
provincial aspect of it is it may require a change in legislation, which would obviously be provincial legislation.
Yeah.
So then it would work. I mean, there's, you know, the Malahide is an obvious candidate. Coquihalla is an obvious candidate. There's places in the north where there's 120 kilometers of nobody, and they find the car 6 hours later. Off.
That brings up another interesting point. It would actually tell you if a car.
Yeah.
If it never comes through, yeah.
That guy's awful
Well,
slow.
usually it's more than, I think that's, I don't know if that point was made. There's often more than one camera, right? It's not just one at the beginning, one at the end. There's multiple cameras, so you can know exactly where a car's disappeared off the route or not. Anyway.
Did you second? I'll second.
It's,
Yeah, I'm seconding it.
well, Karen seconds. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Can I vote?
Yeah, sure. Opposed? Motion carries. Really appreciate you taking the time after
Thanks so
ski
much for
day.
having me. Very kind.
We're all a little
Thanks.
jealous you were out there skiing today. It was gorgeous.
It wasn't
Not
very good.
chilly?
It wasn't very good at all.
Get out. Thanks, Carl.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
For the presentation too, thanks.
Thanks.
All right. We are back in community amending contribution policy, and Gary had finished sort of his presentation. Now we're into discussion. I had Councillor Pryor and then Councillor Wilson.
Yeah. Well, I've struggled over this, and I finally come to the point where I think I understand. So what bothers me is, you know, we pick a number in CACs, but we don't. If you've got a city block that's zoned for 2 units, and someone comes in and says, I want to zone this for 200 units, somebody's making a lot of money. But it's not us. We're getting our community amenity at whatever it is a square foot. And it's not enough. There has to be a way. So I thought it was performance. And I talked to another CAO actually that I knew from another community and said, what do you guys do? And he said, you know what we do? When someone comes in for a big rezoning, they're just giving you the standard CACs, but it's an extensive zone change. You say no, just because you don't think you're getting enough. And then it's up, then it puts the ball back into the developer's court to sweeten the pot a little bit. Other than that, it's performance. And staff have told me that performance aren't really something that anybody wants to get into. So I just think that, you know, we need a new swimming pool, we need a new city hall, and we need all these things we need. And I see some people making a lot of money and it's not us. So.
Gary, the report does talk a little bit about performance and when and how. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
I mean, we've had a discussion, thank you, we've had that discussion internally. Yeah, some communities use them. I think North Van may be one that uses it fairly regularly. They've got their own in-house crew, or they've got access to resources to perform shadow pro forma. Sort of, they perform one, because you're not going to get that information from the developer. You can ask, but you can't demand.
Yeah, that's what
So, I don't know that we'd have to be able to source those resources. And then, frankly, I mean, there's limited understanding of how development financing works inside the department as well. So, it's complex. It doesn't give you a clear answer. It gives you another number. I think what we're suggesting here is that this is the starting point around which staff can negotiate with a developer about what may be an appropriate amenity contribution. I mean, some of them are not inconsequential. I mean, I ran these numbers based on stuff we've approved, or hypothetically. So I mean, some of them end up with, like the PacWest site, could be $2 million.
$500,000.
$2 million. Which is essentially all of them are doubling.
So on 200 units, that's 10,000 units.
Yeah, I don't know that I can ever get to the point that I can tell council that this is the right number.
Yeah, and it's not the numbers right now that people are getting are $650 a square foot for these apartments that they're selling. And, I mean, I'm just saying, my gut feeling is, per unit, after all costs, developers are walking away with 150,000 a unit. 150,000 units, so 100 units, $15 million on a piece of property that we go, okay, we'll rezone that. And so after this guy that I talked to said, Ted, just say no. Then I started thinking, well, to Karen's point a while ago about, we got to kind of slow things down a little bit. I'm going to start saying no myself to big rezones, because if we're not getting enough, and I had a discussion with someone on a development that they were doing, and I said, oh, well, gee, it's pretty good, yeah. And I said, but boy, it sure be nice if you would do this. And they said, oh, that'll have to come out of the CAC amenities. And I'm going, come on, what do you mean? That should be part of your development. And so I started feeling this greed and the pressure that development has to make money. And I think at the point we are now, where the community's busting at its seams, I'm just, personally, I'm going to start backing off on supporting big rezones unless it's well above and beyond the numbers we're putting here, whether there's a real community amenity. And the guy that was bringing in the towers over on the mill site years ago, when they were coming in at 12 stories or whatever it was, and he said, because we were all fighting the height. No, we don't want 12 stories. Oh, no way. And he said, what's wrong with you people? He says, you're selling air, $1 million a floor. And so I look at someplace zoned for 3 stories and we go, okay, we'll give you 6. Well, all costs in plus $1 million a floor. And then now you're starting to get a new swimming pool or some of the amenities we need. But if you look at I look at the state of our infrastructure building-wise, kept me awake at night for a few nights. I mean, I'm not going to stay awake worrying about that, but it did for a while, thinking about, oh my God, we're so far behind, but we're not really taking enough of the action, I think. We just looked at a nice new ice skating rink. Who's the guys getting rich in town? So, and I don't know. And when Karen mentioned at the meeting a couple of meetings ago, she said, can't we just slow things down? And I started thinking when this guy said, just say no. Say no, that's a beautiful structure and I really like it and everything's great. I love everything, but no, we're not giving you the rezoning. Give us more. If they want to say, okay, we'll contribute $1 million or $2 million to the swimming pool on top of this, then we go, thank you. Okay, now you're talking.
Doug?
Yeah, interesting. I won't go down that road for the moment. The reason I had my hand up was when I looked at the applications that proposed 50 or more new dwelling units, So I'm on page 24 of 32 of the report, or 5 of 13 of the policy. And so let me just go to number 6. Or number 5, I'll start with number 5, it's right in front of me. So that's for a single or 2-unit residential. And so in other words, your subdivision is single family or duplex. A minimum of 10% of the principal units to be provided on site as affordable housing units managed under a housing agreement, and transportation park amenities, I'll leave that part aside, or 15,000 per new single detached lot plus 3,000, etc. So if I understand this correctly, and that pattern shows up in a number of different categories, essentially what we're saying to a developer is you can satisfy your entire amenity contribution with affordable housing units. Apart from the park and active transportation issue. So in other words, they can give us 10% of the units, and I'm not sure whether it's give us or just create them and deal with them, or pay us the $15,000 per unit. Am I
That's
misreading
correct.
That's correct,
That's
yeah.
correct.
So that was my problem with this. I get the need for affordable housing, but it's not the only need we have. And we've heard just a few minutes ago about recreation needs. We've heard last week about diking needs. I'm sure everybody around the table has a shopping list as long as their arm about other really important community needs. And I think the pendulum has gone way too far to one side, because there's also the mix or the possibility. So we get the cash, 80% of it or 70% of it, whatever the current policy is, the number goes to affordable housing. I think we've got to back off that a bit. I think we have to balance that out a little bit more. I get the need for that, but I think out of each one of these things, we have to get cash, some cash. And maybe it's 50% of it is in cash and up to the balance in affordable housing units, because we have things that we have to spend that cash on. And we all know there's a huge list of them. So that was my concern. And that hits 3 or 4 of these different categories, was just that it was too far weighted kind of to one sector. I've got other little things, but I'll just leave that comment out there for a minute.
I wrote Jason's name down before he put his hand up. I've got Karen, Susan, Peter, Jason.
So just a couple of questions to help me get my head around this. So we have a subdivision control bylaw, and we have an active transportation plan, and we have a rezoning bylaw. And so are we just through the, like a cash in lieu equivalent of $1 per square foot or for active transportation and park amenities? Aren't we capturing that in our existing bylaws?
Yes, and there's a provision further down that sort of deals with that issue. Yeah, clause 4, so on page 8 of the policy, I'm not quite sure.
What page of the agenda?
That's page 8 of the policy, article 4, page 27 of the agenda package. Excluding any impacts that are addressed through the development cost charge bylaw or the subdivision development control bylaw. So if those have to be done, they're not CAC. So frontage improvements. So it's going to be, so if a development has to produce new curb gutter, sidewalk and a bike lane, well, that's a frontage improvement under the subdivision development control bylaw. It's not eligible as a CAC. It's got to be above and beyond that.
So I'm just confused about what we're asking for, or why we're asking for it.
So it would
if
be,
they have to provide it, because we're setting a new standard, is it for?
It's for offsite.
it could be close to, or it could be off-site, but it's anything in the, it's directed towards producing either physically or cash in lieu, anything that's in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan or the Active Transportation Plan.
Okay, so they definitely have to provide everything they need to provide. They can't opt out of what we've got
On-site.
on-site.
Correct.
So this is to create money for other off-site active transportation or park amenities. And can we include in that description not just active transportation plan and parks and rec master plan, but any future sub-area plans? Because in our OCP, we are now contemplating sub-area plans for all of our existing neighborhoods. And we have quite a few have-not neighborhoods, so I want to make sure those get put in there. I agree with Doug, we need cash for everything. And I'm wondering, in the last CAC interim policy, it sort of designated the funds. But this one doesn't seem to designate funds for any specific pot.
It does for, there are two pots. Council either puts it in the affordable housing pot or the critical amenities pot. Your choice.
Critical amenities meaning?
Those are defined right up front on the second page of the policy. Non-market housing project or capital facilities to fund municipal operations, Brennan Park, Community Hall, anything in the long-term real estate strategy, parks and rec master plan, or otherwise directed by council. So there's a lot more flexibility as to the funds. There's no more of this developer says it goes here, you say it goes here or here.
So can I ask, if we get $2 million, we can say $1 million to affordable housing and $1 million to
or $1 to affordable housing and 1.99 million to critical facilities.
So
you make that
don't have
choice.
that flexibility now.
Yeah.
I prefer that, and I'll concur with Doug that we need cash out of every single development, not just housing. Because in the current plan, don't we just substitute? If you build 10%, then you don't pay CCs on that portion.
Well, we don't have that provision right now. It's just a cash, $6 per square foot.
Susan, then Peter, and Jason.
So I look at this list of projects, and that's pretty much most of our land. And I look at the amounts, and the amounts are weak for affordable housing. So it's not addressing affordable housing issues. And we really do need, and it sounds like we're already looking towards a housing authority where we can designate 15% of every unit's housing to affordable housing as a rental unit or and controlled by a housing authority. Is that correct?
No, we can't do that. That's why we're doing this policy. We don't have the legislative authority to mandate inclusion of zoning.
We
do not.
We don't currently have, but we're moving towards.
That requires an amendment to the local government. It's a provincial change. Now, it may come, there is some discussion even at BC Housing level, but my guess is that legislation is at least a couple of years away. I don't know if Councillor Blackburn or if anything came out of the budget today in terms of...
We haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
So that's a couple of years away. As I said, I think I'm seeing this as a 1 to 2 year stopgap. It plugs the need now. But part of the other...
I think you're answering the wrong question for me.
Okay.
We can ask for affordable housing units in a build. Currently we ask for 4% affordable housing or 10, we currently, people are providing 4% affordable housing. Purpose-built rental, or however it shows up in mixed density housing projects, basically. So that a housing authority designates that, and we say basically through a housing authority that we can assign 10% that every project that comes in has to provide X number of affordable housing units through a housing authority.
I think there's a little bit of confusion here. Maybe I'll take the example on Government Road beside the Breeze.
Yes.
They allocated a certain amount that would be purpose-built rental, but those aren't being given to a housing authority, correct? They're just purpose-built rental with a covenant.
No, absolutely. I'm not talking.
So I just wanted to make sure we were talking about apples and apples.
Yeah. So I'm talking about housing authority units that are set aside for either, staff housing or affordable or social housing units that are managed by a housing authority, exact model that Whistler has, or that many, many cities have, Vancouver, that actually asks for affordable housing units. And I know that some people are moving away from management and they're actually allowing the builders to actually manage the units. So whatever form that looks at, I just wonder about our ability via CACs to collect the appropriate amount of funding to deal with housing issues. And maybe this funds a housing authority, or maybe this money in affordable housing contributes to management of housing authority. But when I look at the numbers, it really is trivial because that doesn't even cover a unit these days. You know, each one of these projects, the money that we take in is half of that to affordable housing, but doesn't really address units in the space or purchasing units.
Maybe Gary can outline how does Whistler Housing Authority get units? And how does City of Vancouver, now they have a different charter, they may have some different rules, but how does City of Vancouver require X percentage to be purpose-built affordable housing?
Vancouver through their CHC policy is my understanding. It's negotiated, it's not mandated through their CHC policy. Whistler's different. The Resort Municipalities Act allows them to do linkages between commercial development, and they're required to provide community housing or workforce housing as part of a commercial development. That's unique to resort municipalities. We don't have that power.
We don't have that power.
Nope.
Not through our legislation that governs us, I just want to make sure that distinction is there.
But the 4%, for instance, Polygon or any of the other developers that have come forward and said, we're going to provide X percent of affordable housing. Can we adjust that number? Can we require that number as a community amenity? Like we say, you know, currently we have some 4%.
That's what this policy is saying, 10%.
10%. So
we can't require it, but what we're saying is
suggesting
this is where we expect you to start the negotiation process.
But can it? Is that number mandated anywhere? Is 10%? We can require 15%.
This is, I think Ted made the point, this is a voluntary contribution. Council doesn't want to say yes to the project, wants to say no, they can say no.
Exactly.
This is the starting point for the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
I think I got it all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah, and to Doug and Karen's point and about taking the cash, I agree with that. And I think it's, I like the idea of using the critical facilities and having the discretion to put more money into that. I think that it's time to maybe switch gears a little bit and start adding more money into those pots as opposed to always to the affordable housing. I know Jason will hate that idea.
Well, let's let Jason speak.
I'll let him take it away.
Well, one of the things that the way that I saw it when we first introduced the interim policy that we're amending now is that the idea was to actually get an affordable housing reserve up and running. I mean, we were kind of starting from zero, and so I'm totally comfortable with the idea that, you know, future councils may decide to allocate things a bit differently, provided, you know, they have the information around, you know, are we funding enough to get started? And, you know, I'll remark that some of the monies that we did collect, we did put to good use by being able to engage affordable housing services and getting some of that policy work development without, you know, boosting taxes. So some of that work is starting to hopefully bear fruit in the next little while. You know, I think always there'll be, as we grow, you know, we'll want to be topping that pot off, but probably not at the same level that we might have in the first few years. And I think specifically of our community recreation facilities at Brennan Park as being another important thing. Definitely you can see it in some of the cities in the Lower Mainland that have been very successful at grabbing some funding out of the amenity contribution. So in terms of the actual policy, and the other thing is in the budget, I think the government is looking at, they haven't announced a specific thing. They're going to do some consultations with municipalities to look at regulatory tools, and I think one of those things would be changing what municipalities have the option to do in terms of their zoning schedules and some of those more mandatory things, to sort of take it out of the realm of the discretionary and put it into some zoning bylaw stuff. But that remains to be seen, and it'll be probably 2 or 3 years before we actually see that all come together. But in the meantime, yeah, I think the amounts that we're looking at, I'd be comfortable with going a bit higher than 11. I think we could probably push it a bit, given current market conditions. So I'm thinking somewhere probably under 20, but you know, I think we're we're in a bit of a different scenario than some of the other municipalities. Like, there's not really one that we can compare ourselves with. I think we're quite unique in terms of our market. And I think that's a good thing. I think there's a little bit more room. I mean, you look at the change in prices a little since we adopted the first policy, very significant. So if that helps us get some of our amenities and affordable housing priorities tackled a bit faster, then I don't think that something under 20 is going to be a showstopper for most developments. I mean, companies are never happy to pay more, but I think it won't affect the liability. So I'd be prepared to entertain something a bit higher.
Doug?
Thanks. Just a couple of points, sort of technical points in this. So one is the GFA. So when you're talking about so many dollars a square foot, how that's calculated. And when I look at that, referred to a definition, I haven't got it in front of me, but I was wondering if that's the same as the definition we use for FAR. In other words, is that calculated on garage space or corridors, or is it just pure kind of the net usable space? So that was the first question. The second question, and we had that discussion the other day in terms of the FAR discussion, what it actually covers when we were talking about some of the zoning issues. And so I thought it might be consistent. Are we charging so much per square foot for a garage space, for example, in a multifamily development? So that was one question. The other was, with the purpose-built rental, which is covenanted, that's market rental. The developer owns it, doesn't come to us, it just has to be rented. And we don't control the rents, and so there's no credit for that development. We're just saying it has to be done. Am I correct in saying that?
It has to be done, sorry?
Well, we're telling a developer, we're not rezoning it unless you have so many purpose-built rentals.
Yeah, that's effectively a CAC.
So there's a credit then against what, if we start off with the basis of, call it $11,000 or $20,000 a square foot, and that comes out with a number, and then the question is what gets credited against it. And so you get a credit for sub-market rental. Do you also get a credit for purpose-built rental that's rented at market?
No, I mean, that's one of the things that I suggested needs some discussion. What I've proposed here is that essentially the equivalency is much lower, is that you get far more credit for purpose-built rental.
Oh, I beg your pardon. So that goes to the 3,000...
To the $3 a square foot, or 5%.
Okay.
So trying to, as best we can, incentivize or not put the CAC policy in front of purpose-built rental, but not sort of say, well, that's your CAC. That's what I tried to do in the policy.
So if I can just follow. So with the sub-market rental, now that could be a credit against the policy amount, the cash amount, and we just talked about that. So the question is how much of a credit each unit would give. And so when I've talked to developers, they say, yeah, there's a delta, what they call the delta, the difference between fair market value for a market unit versus what this might be worth to sell it to an investor who has to then just rent it out sub-market. So obviously worth less than a complete investment unit. And how is that calculated? And how do we know that that's the equivalent of $11,000 or $20,000 per square foot, or per unit rather, whatever it was, whatever the calculation was. How do we make comparison between the cash amount versus the unit, the number of units coming in compensation or credited against them? Am I making sense?
I think so. So I think if they give 10% of the units as sub-market rentals, essentially for the life of the building in perpetuity, that along with the active transportation and park improvements would constitute their CAC.
Right. So that number is instead of whatever it was, the thousands of dollars per square foot. No,
yes.
Thousands of dollars per unit. I'm sorry, I'm mixing up numbers. Excuse me, just bear with me a second. Let me just find it again.
Chair, I just don't want to lose sight of the FSR versus.
Yeah, I'll come back to that.
Yeah, that's a tricky, because we're trying to equate lot value with the single family and duplex stuff with unit
This is
value.
$11, I beg your pardon.
I don't know how, that would be a fairly complex.
Well, what the policy says, if I can just finish this point. So right now it's $11 for multifamily over 50, $11 a square foot. And we'll talk in a minute about how the square foot is calculated, but $11 a square foot, so for a given development, that comes up with a number, say $1 million. Or the developer can provide 10% of the units sub-market.
Yep.
And a covenant for that, of course, for perpetuity. So that represents a cost to the developer between what those units would be without that covenant, just that they could sell in the open market, versus what they'll sell them for to an investor who will understand that there's a reduced cash flow and so will pay less for it. So a $500,000 unit, for example, might sell for $400,000 unit, $400,000. So the developers incurred a cost of $100,000 per unit. And so if you had $1 million in the first calculation, you had 10 and 100,000 unit, then the two of them balance off. 10 times 100,000 versus the $1 million cash going the other. So how do we know that that's always going to be the case? What if the cash analysis said it's not $1 million, it's $1.5 million, for example, and especially if we go and raise them to say $20 a foot. What if the square foot analysis brings us to a number like $1.5 million, but the difference to the developer is only 100,000 unit, they put 10 units into it, that's $1 million. And so they, in effect, incurred a cost of $1 million to replace a cost of $1.5 million. How do the two correlate? How do we decide that that number of units equals what the square foot cost should be if it was being paid by cash?
I think you just got to get it as close as possible, but it's going to depend on type of buildings and everything.
And it comes down to the negotiation. This is the negotiation. This is the starting point of negotiation.
So we have to bump that number. In the negotiation, we'll say, no, it's not 10%, it's going to be 12 or 14 or 15% to make that equivalent to the cash equivalent.
Well,
I
mean, don't, I'm sorry?
You've made a bit of an assumption there to give that rate, haven't you? That's,
Yeah.
you're assuming it has a value of X.
Yeah.
It's just what went into that ground truthing to make sure it's
Yeah,
comparable.
that would be quite the exercise to try and figure out if 11 is, and I think it would depend on the type of units.
I suspect the developer's going to make that and then choose the cheaper one.
Yeah, I think if we see a whole bunch of people opting for cash in lieu, we know we've set it too low.
Exactly.
If everyone says, hey, here's the cash, no units, we know we've set it too low. But if they're starting to bring units, we've probably got it wrong.
The other way around. This is an organic.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go to Jason.
Yeah, and I guess too, that's also where the conversation comes in about the, nonprofit or housing authority, because then that's a different model where maybe they're going to give us those 10 units and we take them over and take over the revenue that comes from them, and then, how do you calculate that is also another question. But my answer to that question would be that you just calculate what the value is, and then if there's an owing balance, then they pay cash for the rest, bump up their CAC and then cover it off. And that may be attractive to some developers so that they can kind of mix the timing around when money is being spent and when units are being delivered, and kind of layering it in that sense. So you could actually, if it did turn out that your 10 units actually are worth less than what the CAC target is per square foot, you would still be owing the district, X number of few $100,000, $500,000 in that example.
Just a couple sentences to finish this up. So I think my view is that we should have some flexibility in there on whether it's 10%, 11%, 12% to equal what the cash value would be. And I think it's just an appraisal process. I think you can get appraisal evidence that will give you the difference between fair market value and if we're charging 80%, presumably that'll reflect as 80% of fair market value. So you can get that difference and figure out how many units it takes to make up the cash equivalent. So as long as we have some flexibility in there to go through that negotiation and it's not too firm, so that from time to time we can talk to the appraisal community and see what are these things selling for, what are they renting for, etc. Then I'm happy with that. And the other was just quickly was going back to that gross floor area discussion. Is that livable space or is that things like corridors
What's the difference
and
between
garages?
GFA and FSR or FAR?
It's the same definition as the zoning bylaw, and I believe that's essentially livable area. FSR or G or FAR is simply a numerical. It's a ratio that's developed from the GFA. They're not related. There's no connection, mathematical connection between.
So give us an example of it, there's a 100-unit apartment building. How are you measuring the GFA?
My understanding, and unfortunately Jonas would be a better answer, is hallways and garages are out.
Okay.
Everything else is in.
Common areas of it.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
And that's what he said for the FAR, and he said that that's not the same as other municipalities, but that was my understanding too, and I just wanted to make sure that GFA was the same thing, or if we are in fact charging for corridors and garages and electrical rooms. And
I don't believe this would be, no.
It's sort of a per door.
The difficulty of doing the mathematics that you suggested is we're often at a very early stage, and we just don't have that information, and the developer isn't going to give it to us. It's back almost into the pro forma discussion. We're at an inherent disadvantage here, is we don't know a lot of the data we would love to know, and they're not going to give it to us. So
I think
what we're trying to do is short circuit that and say this is as close as we can get. That's a very simple, straightforward way for developers to know what they're getting into potentially right off the bat, rather than getting into, am I going to have to pony a bit more up at third reading because things have shifted? I just don't know that we will be.
So I think we're going to find out, the first application comes in, wherever they're doing it, we'll find out where the deficiency is. I think that's going to...
Yeah.
This is an organic document. That we're going to look at this in a year, ground truth it, see where development applications were falling, and I think we'll figure out where the gap is. It's not going to be perfect.
But one of the variables is, I buy a city block for 200,000 and then I rezone it for 200 units. There's a huge bump, and we're not capturing that. So we as a council approve a rezoning that adds huge amounts to the property value, and all we're going for is the profit on the building. We're leaving the rest on the table, and that's the flaw. And that's what we need. We need our share of that to build our swimming pools and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Councillor Pryor, that's a land value capture tax. That's different. CAC policies aren't intended.
No, I know that. Yeah. And that's why when I asked advice from somebody else, they said, just say no. That's your only, if you want more money, just say, sorry, that's a great, I like the building and I like everything, but
and council
they'll
will have
come
that.
back.
Continue to have that
Council's
discussion.
hammer at any given time?
Yeah, I know,
Absolutely.
but we don't understand. I didn't understand that. How about that? I didn't understand that we could possibly, on some of these big developments, could have got something in addition.
Nancy Reagan used to say it, just say no to it.
Yeah.
That's another topic.
Yeah.
I generally thought we're going in the right direction with this. I like the flexibility for councils, depending on if we want to build up reserves in the affordable housing piece, or if we have a particular target in the real estate master plan or whatever it is, that we have that flexibility built in, which is great. I think we're gonna find out really soon where the gap is or where the preference might be with developers. I would sort of like to understand a little bit more, inching it up, as Jason said, towards a bit of a higher number to understand the intended and unintended consequences of that. I'm sure we'll get feedback on that type of thing, but I wouldn't mind exploring a little bit in terms of where that line may be. And when I initially read this last week, I was a little concerned it was a little confusing. But after I reread it 3 or 4 times, I think I started to, it just, and I just want to, if staff starts to see it becoming a cumbersome policy, that we correct it quickly to make sure it's not too ambiguous or can be manipulated too much or too confusing or whatever. Just keep a real close eye on it.
Absolutely.
Doug?
Yeah, just comments generally. I think we could also explore a higher number. Maybe 20, a jump to 20 right away might be a little bit big, but at least 15, and maybe think about 20 at the start of next year or something, just step it in. So I could look at something like that. The other thing is, going back to my point about getting at least some cash out of these things, the larger developments. I mean, if we just think out loud, if we said 50% of it at least has to be cash and the other 50% could be through provision of non-market housing, at least then if we're wrong, we're only half wrong. So it kind of hedges on the bets until we kind of get the feel of the policy. I guess that's maybe another advantage of it, but I'll leave it at that.
I might be able to tweak it to offer a combination thereof, something of that. Leave that thought with me and I'll see if I can remedy that.
Yeah, I made the point. I think of all the other things we have to spend money on. I take the importance of affordable housing, there's no doubt about that, but just, we have one source of cash here and we have to kind of spread it around a little bit. So.
Keep in mind that the smaller applications, sub 50, that's all cash.
I understand that.
The other thing is, it's not a sustainable or robust source of funding. So in terms of putting this in as a funding source into the long-term real estate facility strategy, probably is not a prudent. It comes and it goes. One year it'll be huge, and the next year it might be nothing.
So. It might go into reserves for saving it up. But
okay,
take the point.
Yeah, it will be interesting to understand this rental zone proposition that the government talked about last week in their throne speech. I'm not sure if staff's started to dig into what that may or may not mean, or how we may or may not incorporate it. It may be something that should be in the OCP as well, if this is a tool, and I don't know when the tool is going to be actually coming forward for municipalities, but I'm not sure if staff's looked into that yet.
No, but my toolbox doesn't have a lid on. If I've got to toss another tool in really quickly, I will do that. So.
Yeah, but has staff looked at this whole idea of rental zoning that the province floated out in the throne speech last week?
No, but I would presume it allows us to, along the inclusionary zoning thread, I presume it allows us to zone and require purpose-built rentals, which is something we cannot do. Because you're regulating tenure, not use.
So. Exactly. So I'm looking forward to that too.
Oh yeah, that
speaks
inclusionary
to
zoning.
the stuff that I think Councillor Chappelle was trying to get at a little bit ago, that we can't do now, but it sounds like the government's trying to give us the tools to do that. Trying. Anyway, excellent. Any other comments? So Gary, based on the conversation, you're going to go and
I'm going to
tweak away
change
again?
11 and put 15 in. There are some sub-area plan references that I need to do, and on the larger applications, perhaps allow a combination thereof, cash in lieu and provision.
And question on the greenfield, maybe this question up to council. I'm trying to remember, I think it's $3 extra, or is this something council's okay with? I think, remind me, I'm just looking right on that page here.
Yes, it is.
$3,000, what was it again?
$3 per square foot premium in addition to everything else, the 11 or the 15 $3 a square foot for new additional greenfield applications.
Or 3,000 per single detached lot.
Yes.
Is this enough, council, for greenfield development? Thoughts on that?
Well, a couple of thoughts. So you say, what is the impact of that versus developing a developed site? You have all the issues with what is greenfield. There's no old growth in the valley, and so it's all as a scrub lot versus something. And what is the different impact, going through the notes from the developers, what is the different impact to the community of this development? In other words, is there some justification for it? I mean, you have people living there versus people living there, but they're running around using the same services, et cetera, and have the same impact on pools and parks and all the rest of it. So, so I think it's sort of, on one side I can see there's no fair way to charge it. On the other side, it's not that much, and let's charge it.
Anybody else?
I agree.
Is it enough?
Yep.
Jason?
Well, I mean, if we're going to 20 next year, then I think we're okay. But
$20, yeah.
I mean, and I don't know. I think
$3 a bumper.
yeah.
I'm just trying to, like, I think the definition of greenfield is something that we struggle with.
It's fairly loose.
Yeah,
It's basically undeveloped land that's not serviced.
yeah.
Like to me, the where you would get into that is if, for example, you know, there are facilities that are centralized and don't really fall under our subdivision and control bylaws in terms of adding a new community, but where, you know, if you do have expansive greenfield, then it's like, okay, well, for adequate service levels, for example, for fire protection, we need to build a new fire hall. It's because we had all this growth in greenfield, and so that's sort of where I would consider some of those key facilities, or, you know, maybe we need another, you know, maybe Brennan Park is too far away and it's not accessible. We're gonna build another community center or library or whatever else, you know, when we get to those thresholds. And I sort of see that as that's a 25-year kind of horizon, but that's what I would intend when we talk about greenfields, is really some of those new things.
And thus the need for a little extra. And stuff not built in the infrastructure just costs us more, period, doesn't matter what it is. Anybody else? Karen, Susan, Pete?
I agree with Jason. I think that money is to be set aside for future services that we need to deliver, because our town's not 20,000 people, it's 40,000 people. I think the majority of where we want to work with what is greenfield and what do we expect from greenfield is in the zoning bylaw, to make sure that it meets a certain bar. I think that's where we want to define it more clearly, but here I think that money gets set aside for, upgrades to the library, another fire hall, a pool, definitely, I don't know, another pool, starting to distribute services because the town is more challenging to get around. So I think it's fair, and we'll get feedback, and we can adjust it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I don't know, building on greenfield just makes not a lot of sense. So charging more for building, like that's a pretty weak amount. But I agree that as we move forward, we can look at adjusting. I'm looking forward to getting feedback on this policy as it is. So, and it can be adjusted later. This is not the end of this policy. I agree with Gary, it's a good for now. And I'm happy to support it in its good for now state with some feedback coming back. But my biggest concern is the list of properties that are currently in building right now.
And these ones are done.
Yeah, exactly.
This is
It's
old.
too late. That's exactly it.
Go ahead.
I think it's great, and I think once we start applying it, key things are gonna bubble up out of the process, and we'll be able to identify those, and, you know, it's organic, it'll change as we go. So far, good for me.
No, I just wanted to make sure we address the Greenfield, so we hadn't had a conversation about it. Anything else that we missed in this conversation that you need feedback on, Gary?
No, I think I've got a meeting with an industry group next week.
Wear your suit of
Again, I'll
arms.
be the least popular guy in the room. Maybe I'll bring support next time. And then I suspect I can bring it back sometime in March, either with further comments or for approval.
If you survive it.
No.
Yeah,
If
the
I
other-
don't come back. Sorry.
Send Guido with.
The other part of this conversation is the policy we have about, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but 70% goes to affordable housing, 20% to community amenities, and for a while we had a portion going to daycare, which is not part of this, but I think it's certainly related to this. Is that a separate discussion? Was that the intent to have that
I
revisited, or?
This replaces
This
that.
replaces it so that it's
Oh.
just making 2 pockets, and council really has the discretion of where to either affordable housing or all these critical amenities. We can choose whatever that is, whether it's daycare or fire hall, Brennan Park.
Okay.
We can literally
So that's
hustle the day and
a
choose.
day-by-day thing?
Yeah, and that, yeah, exactly, where the needs are at a particular time and place, and, but this, instead of being very, as prescriptive as it was back then, of 5% here, this is 2 pockets. Council can shift and weigh depending on if we need to build up an affordable housing reserve, or if we have a particular need or a particular project that comes up in a master plan or some area plan that we want to fulfill, so it's much more flexible in that way.
May I just throw a strategy on the table? I would recommend, as a finance manager who sees people split up money all over the place, don't keep that critical amenity provision and then use it as it suits you moving forward.
I believe that's what I just said.
Sometimes people want to designate it specifically.
No, I think that's what we're saying is.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Given the time and place, we may go, we're gonna spend that on this, or we're gonna spend that, but no, it's.
It's better to
It's
conglomerate and
two
then you can
pockets.
really do something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, if I might just make a comment on that amenity, critical amenity, because when I was reading this, I thought what we also want to make clear is that it could be anywhere in the district. Because we've seen developers say, well, we'll put it into the park across the street or something because that adds value to my development, so I'm happy to do that. And for me, I mean, the park down here benefits somebody in Brackendale, the dikes benefit all of us. There's all kinds of things. City Hall benefits the whole community. So I wouldn't want to be restrictive in that. And
I think the policy is very clear, it's council's discretion,
yeah,
period.
and
You just
don't let
explained that.
developers kind of try to dictate that part of it.
Would be the end of that.
Yeah.
You make those decisions about whether it's fun or
Yes. Okay, excellent, do you have enough feedback?
Yes,
Do you
thank
need
you.
a resolution of any kind, or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Good job, Gary.
Awesome, thanks,
Come
Gary.
here. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
I will give a motion to terminate, moved by Ted, seconded by Peter, all those in favor, opposed, motion carries.